Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, October 2nd. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 727 as we approach the third year of genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we'll speak with author and filmmaker Haim Bresheeth-Zabner about how Israel is what he terms the chaos engine of Western imperialism. Later on in the program, Jon will cover the latest from the Second Battle of Gaza City, and he'll break down the newly released footage of the resistance raid on an Israeli military outpost in Khan Yunis last month. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine. Israel has killed at least 429 Palestinians and injured more than 1,500 between September 24th and October 1st, according to official records from the Ministry of Health in Gaza. The Israeli army has continued to intensify its attacks on northern Gaza and Gaza City in particular. On September 27th, journalist Saleh al-Jafarawi documented Israeli helicopter gunships and drone artillery firing heavily in the north.
نصور تقرير عن وضع المنطقة الصعب جدا.
الكواد جنبيها بالضبط.
حاليا طيران الأباتشي قاعد بيطلق النار بكثافة.
In Gaza City on September 29th, reporter Hassan Salem captured Israeli airstrikes on several buildings in one residential block close to Al-Shifa Hospital. The Mecca residential tower in western Gaza City was bombed by the Israeli army also on September 29th. Journalist Khamis al-Rafi captured the explosion on video. James Elder, the spokesperson for the UN children's agency UNICEF, recorded himself at Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in central Gaza on September 26th, as children poured into the emergency room with injuries from Israeli quadcopter fire.
This is just absolutely out of control. I promised myself the first story to being back in Gaza would be just some of the incredible volunteers and the joy they're bringing to kids, even in hospitals. And I'm here, and the first room I'm in, there are four children who've all been hit by quadcopters. 4 children. And then we're in a makeshift ICU, a makeshift intensive care, because there are so many children, and all 4 of these children have been hit by quadcopters. 2 minutes later in the ICU, sitting with this little girl, Aya, who is 5 years old, and she died in front of us. Then there's a little girl, Sham, who just got raced in here. Sham has just been raced in here. And she's been pulled out under the rubble, but they can't find her mum, and her sister has died. And then there's this little guy, Barra. Barra's got shrapnel in his neck. I mean, I can feel Barra's feet, mate. Barra's cold. Barra's in a critical condition, as was a little boy just over here on the floor who'd been shot. He was lying in his own blood for 5 hours in the corridor. Finally, when doctors found space for him on a bed, as soon as he left the corridor, another wounded child went onto the floor. And this little boy who was bleeding, his mother was just screaming to him, saying, "Who around the world allows this to happen? Who around the world allows this to happen?" She asked and she asked.
Also in central Gaza, the UN Human Rights Office documented the killing of nearly 90 Palestinians in at least 12 separate Israeli attacks in Nuseirat and al-Zuwaydah areas over 5 days between September 24th and 28th. Those attacks include strikes on the tents of displaced families, residential units, and inside refugee camps. Reporter Bilal Abu Amr captured this clip of the aftermath of Israeli airstrikes on the Abu Dahrouj family in Nuseirat refugee camp on September 26th. In addition, the UN says the Israeli military has reportedly launched airstrikes from drones, as well as fired artillery and live gunfire, quote, against those gathering firewood, especially in northern central Gaza, causing dozens of casualties. Israel has completely blocked the entry of cooking gas since March 2nd, 2025, forcing people to rely on wood, mostly derived from flammable debris from destroyed buildings and broken furniture, as the only available source of fuel for cooking. As part of Israel's stated and open intention to expel all Palestinians from Gaza City and elsewhere in the north, the Israeli army has closed al-Rashid Street, the main north-south artery along the coast for traffic going in and out of Gaza City. Our contributor Mohammed Assad recorded this clip on Wednesday as the Israelis announced the closure of al-Rashid Street. Israeli War Minister Israel Katz boasted that Gaza is now formally divided into north and south, and the closure is intended, quote, to tighten the encirclement around Gaza City, requiring anyone who leaves southward to pass through Israeli army checkpoints. Katz added that this is, quote, the last opportunity for residents of Gaza City to move south, further threatening that, quote, those who remain in Gaza will be considered terrorists and terror supporters. The Gaza government media office stated that this arbitrary measure, quote, falls within the framework of the occupation's ongoing policy of oppression, blockade, and genocide against our Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. Israel continues to bomb hospitals and the areas surrounding them. On September 30th, reporter Saad Hezbollah filmed the Israeli army firing gas bombs near Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. At least 11 unidentified Palestinians were buried in a mass grave inside the hospital's grounds on the same day. Photojournalist Mahmoud Aliwa filmed workers transporting the bodies and burying them inside a large gravesite next to the hospital as drones buzzed overhead. Israel bombed the grounds of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital on Wednesday for the 15th time, according to the Gaza government media office, which said that Israel targeted, quote, a group of displaced citizens within the walls of Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in the central Gaza Strip. 2 people had come to the hospital for treatment and were subjected to bombing near the new internal medicine department. This criminal bombing, the media office added, resulted in serious injuries and extensive material damage and posed a direct threat to the lives of dozens of patients inside the hospital. It also endangered the lives of more than 70 journalists and media professionals, as the bombing occurred just meters away from them while they were covering the events and developments of genocide, aggression, and forced displacement. Israel bombed Al-𝐓𝐿 International Hospital in Gaza City on September 28th. Journalist Hassam Salem filmed this clip, exploring the hospital in the aftermath of the attacks. Ismail Al-Tawabta, the director of the health ministry's media office, told the Anadolu news agency that the Israeli army shelled the hospital with 2 missiles, making the entry to or exit from the hospital impossible. Quote, doctors and patients inside the hospital are living in a state of terror and severe fear, which has been worsened by the occupation's deliberate cutoff of the hospital's internet network, to isolate it from the outside world and suspend medical services for civilians, the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 said. People recovering from complex orthopedic surgeries were captured on video evacuating the hospital in wheelchairs. The Samir Project, a mutual aid organization in Gaza, filmed people after they were forced out of the hospital by the Israeli army amid quadcopter fire, shelling, and sniper attacks. One man says that there is no place for him to go and that the Israeli military vehicles kept advancing toward the hospital.
ايش صار معك يا عمو؟
مستشفى الحلو خبطوها غدار دمار وكواد كل شيء. طلعت انا والناس كثير مصابين وطلعونا طلعت معهم. والله ما نعرف وين رايح. والله
صار تقدم للآليات وانت كنت في المستشفى؟
صعب الامور صعب الآليات هيهم قاعد قدمنا كثير تقدموا والله.
وين رايح انت هالبيت؟
والله ما احنا عارفين وين مكان رايح كله حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل.
Israel continued to attack rescue crews this week. On September 30th, in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 neighborhood in Gaza City, Mahmoud Basal, the spokesperson for Gaza's civil defense, said that Israeli forces directly targeted their staff with a drone while they were on a humanitarian rescue mission at Al-Falah school, where displaced families had been sheltering. 7 civil defense personnel were injured, and rescue worker Mondar Rahed al-Dahshan was killed. Basal said that more than 30 members of the civil defense have been killed in the last 2 years. Quote, "The person you see in this shroud is a human being," Basal said, "who has the right to live, who has the right to get married, who has the right to live like any other human being in the world. But the occupation has deprived him of the most basic right in existence, which is the right to live. We will continue this humanitarian service because it is truly humanitarian to serve our people." On September 29th, a nurse at Nasser Medical Complex, Marwan Abdin, was shot in the head as he stood in the doorway of a room inside the hospital. Journalist Hussein Khares filmed this clip.
Yes, he's one of our medical staff. He was shot inside the complex, as you can see. It's now. He's in very critical situation. I think he's going to pass away. Oh my God.
Another attack on medical services injured paramedic Omar Al-Mazah on September 29th, while he and rescue crews were working to evacuate wounded people from under the rubble of a house in western Gaza City, and the Israeli army bombed the same area again. This clip of the attack on the rescue workers is from Gaza 24 Live. The home belonged to family members of the Hasira clan, who were targeted along with other local families after Israel's Shin Bet intelligence agency began pressuring them to cooperate with its operations in Gaza. Community elders were reportedly asked to form local armed groups, manage and police aid distribution, fight Hamas, and pass intelligence to Israel, according to Israeli and regional news outlets. The families had refused such demands and say that they knew reprisals against them would happen. Euromed Human Rights Monitor says that it gathered testimonies by families who were, quote, forced to choose between remaining under siege and bombardment with no shelter, food, or medicine, and forced displacement into unknown conditions lacking basic life necessities, all under explicit threats of death if they refused Israeli orders. These testimonies, Euromed adds, show a deliberate policy to break civilian will by using fear and destruction as instruments of subjugation. This is a dangerous policy of extortion by Israeli forces against families in the Gaza Strip, the rights group says. Quote, "What began as individual extortion has escalated into a systematic, collective practice aimed at dismantling Palestinian social fabric by forcing people to betray their communities and subordinating survivors to survival conditions that destroy communal identity and resilience. the pressure has shifted from targeting individuals to organized collective extortion that places entire families before a horrific equation. Join militias created by Israel or face persecution, mass killing, starvation, and forced expulsion, a coordinated attempt to eliminate Palestinian society or reduce it to submission under occupation control. One massacre, Euromed states, carried out on September 27th against the Bakr family in the beach refugee camp that killed 9 family members, including children, quote, occurred one day after the family refused an Israeli demand to remain in place on the condition that its members form and serve in a local militia aligned with the army, similar to the Abu Shabab gang established east of Rafah. Euromed Monitor's field team reported that Israeli forces have begun forming similar groups in multiple other areas of Gaza, including South Khan Yunis, East Shujaiya, and Beit Lahia in the north. Starvation is continuing to kill Palestinians across Gaza. On Wednesday, the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza said that it had recorded 2 more deaths due to malnutrition, including a child, over a 24-hour period, bringing the total recorded number of starvation deaths to 455, including 151 children. And local infrastructure agencies in Gaza say that Israeli attacks are further depriving Palestinians of clean water. Al Jazeera's Ibrahim al-Khalili reported that more than 75% of Gaza's central water wells are out of service because of Israeli attacks, and the Electronic Intifada's contributor Asim al-Nabih of the Gaza municipality told Al Jazeera that people are getting less than a quarter of their daily water needs. Israel killed at least 3 more journalists in Gaza this week. On Saturday, the Gaza government media office confirmed that Mohammed Al-Daya of the Palestinian Media Center was killed. The media office also confirmed that Sami Daoud, who worked as a reporter for Rawafed TV, was killed on Tuesday. Also on Tuesday in Deir Balah, photographer Yahya Barzak was killed in an Israeli airstrike. He was a contributor to different media outlets and was a skilled and beloved portrait photographer of newborn babies before the genocide began. With these deaths, Israel has killed at least 254 reporters and media workers since October 2023. On Wednesday evening and into Thursday, in international waters where Israel has no jurisdiction, Israeli naval ships blocked, arrested, and kidnapped hundreds of activists aboard the Gaza Samud flotilla. Some were attacked by Israeli water cannons as they tried to evade Israeli naval hijackings and continued toward Gaza's shores. As of airtime, all 44 boats were blocked and hijacked. The flotilla intended to break the criminal siege on Gaza and had been sailing from southern Europe carrying food, water, medicine, diapers, baby formula, and other essential supplies that Israel has blockaded from Gaza as part of its genocide. The Freedom Flotilla Coalition stated on social media that, quote, Israel has attacked the global Samud flotilla in international waters. People of conscience have been abducted. The flotilla broke no laws. What is illegal is Israel's genocide, Israel's illegal blockade of Gaza, and Israel's use of starvation as a weapon. Unarmed people of conscience abducted in international waters. This is piracy. This is kidnapping, the coalition stated. Footage from the Anas al-Sharif boat, which was hijacked by Israeli soldiers early Thursday morning and was named after the Al Jazeera journalist who was assassinated by Israel in August, shows Israeli soldiers taking over the boat and disabling the live camera feed. Earlier on Wednesday, just days after it announced that it was accompanying the flotilla with a naval ship, the Spanish government withdrew and turned back, saying that it had respect for the humanitarian mission, but that it urged the flotilla to avoid confrontation with Israel. Italy had also sent a ship to escort the flotilla as well, but it turned back earlier in the week. Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, who was aboard one of the first boats to be intercepted, the Alma, recorded this clip just before Israeli soldiers boarded the boat and abducted everyone aboard.
My name is 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and I'm currently on board the boat Alma as part of the global 𝐓𝐡𝐞 flotilla, a peaceful humanitarian mission to deliver aid to the civilian population of Gaza and to break Israel's illegal and inhumane siege. And it is likely to believe that we will be intercepted tonight by Israel, which would be a blatant violation of humanitarian and maritime law. Israel is not immune to international law. They must be held accountable for their war crimes. Stop the genocide, stop the occupation, and free Palestine.
We've published many features on the Electronic Intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight Nightmares Asleep, Nightmares Awake by 𝐓𝐡𝐞, writing from Gaza. Ali writes about Israel's bombing of the Al-Jundi al-Majhoul Tower in Gaza City a few weeks ago, which was adjacent to where he lived. The bombing, he says, turned the night crimson, streaked with a dim white light. After the bombing, Ali says he went back to his apartment, which he and his family began renting in 2024 after returning to Gaza City from the south. Quote, "It was unrecognizable when we entered. Everything bore the marks of the nearby shelling. Shattered glass littered every corner. Wooden doors had been ripped from their frames, some splintered into pieces, while aluminum window frames had been reduced to fragments. The sofas were half torn, the fridge was split into four, the washing machine had been rendered useless, the sink was smashed, and the sewage system was completely destroyed. 2 of the 4 solar panels lay broken on the floor. Most of my university books, which I had left on the balcony, were torn apart. Even my mattress was ripped in half. Still, we returned to the apartment to clean and to repair what we could. When night fell, I laid my head on the pillow, trying to find sleep. But almost every night, once my eyelids began to close, nightmares strike like sudden flashbacks. I see myself running through blazing red flames, thick gray dust clouding my vision. I'm carrying too much, and things keep falling from my hands. Crowds surround me in a distant circle, silent, unreachable. The only sound is relentless bombing. I feel lost. I search for someone to help. I wake up sweating, my breathing rapid, my heart racing. I realize it is just a nightmare. This, a horror Israel has inflicted on me in my sleep. There is no relief in waking up, however. Israel has inflicted a real nightmare on me and everyone in Gaza City when it ordered us to evacuate to the south. Maybe the south is less dangerous than the north, but it is not a safe zone as they claim. What's more, there is not enough space for all the people of Gaza. Dangerous or less dangerous, we are all destined to die one day. My family and I decided not to go south. If death must come, it can find us in Gaza City, the place where we were raised and where we took our first breaths and our first steps, the place where we became who we are. Those are excerpts from Nightmares Asleep, Nightmares Awake by 𝐓𝐡𝐞, an English student and a writer in Gaza, on electronicintifada.net. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and resilience across Gaza and around the world. We go back to the global 𝐓𝐡𝐞 flotilla to Gaza, where activists on one of the boats sang a version of the anti-fascist Italian song Bella Ciao just before the boat was hijacked by Israeli soldiers in international waters.
Viva Palestina, Bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 viva, viva Palestina. We'll be free from the river to the sea. Viva, viva Palestina. Bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao.
And just a few miles away, on the shores of Palestine's Gaza Strip, musician Mohammed Abu Qamar and his friends sang for the honor and freedom of the people on the flotilla and in Palestine.
يشهد التاريخ أن أحرار وأبطال هذه الأمة هم على أسطول الحرية. اشهد يا عالم على أسطول الحرية، شرفاء الكرة الأرضية انفضوا لغزة ما خافوا من الموت، لا يصدح صوت الحرية. اشهد يا عالم عسطول الحرية شرفاء الكرة الأرضية نهضوا لغزة ما خافوا من الموت لا يصدح صوت الحرية من طيارات.
And finally, Italian union workers and activists who promised to shut down the country once again in a general strike if the flotilla was impeded began their mass protests and strikes on Wednesday evening. Giovani Palestinesi d'Italia, the Palestinian Youth of Italy movement, uploaded this video from Rome on Wednesday evening. And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. Thank you for that. Another harrowing week since you last gave that briefing, and those words written by Ali 𝐓𝐿𝐿 in Gaza City are particularly haunting, given that just in the last couple of hours, the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said that anyone who doesn't leave Gaza would be considered a terrorist, anyone who doesn't leave Gaza City, and therefore marked for death. And as we'll talk about later in the program, including with our next guest, all of the countries that claim to be supporting Palestinian rights or care about Palestinian rights are actually escalating their support for this genocide, including France, which put on that whole charade of recognizing a Palestinian state. What was it? Not even a week ago. And today, the French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot just recently welcomed Trump's plan for Gaza that we'll be talking about, and said that the Palestinians must surrender. That's the word he used, surrender. France, of course, knows a great deal about surrender. Yep.
Yeah, they do. And they know a great deal about collaborating with a regime that is fueled by genocide. And throwing their own people under the bus and calling that democracy. And that's what they want for Palestinians. They want complete surrender. They're now saying it outright. I know we're going to have a lot of time later in the program to talk about the so-called 20-point plan that all of these European and Western and even some leaders of the global South are now touting, and the Pope from Chicago is now saying that this is, and of course the UN chief are all giving it their full-throated backing, complete surrender, disarmament of people who are experiencing genocide, and absolutely no punishment of those who are carrying out the genocide. It's completely predictable. But we'll be talking about that.
It's grotesque. It's grotesque.
Yeah.
And it deserves our anger and our disgust.
Yes, 100%. Well, let's bring on our first guest and see what he has to say about this debacle. Yeah.
All right. Well, just a reminder that you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Ali Abunimah here with my colleague, Nora Barrows-Friedman. We will be joined today in just a moment by Professor Haim Bresheeth-Zabner, a filmmaker, photographer, and a film studies scholar, previously at the University of London. He's now retired from there and is now at SOAS, the University of London. He's also an occasional contributor over many years to the Electronic Intifada. Haim's last book was titled An Army Like No Other, How the Israel Defense Forces Made a Nation, published by Verso in 2020. Rod Such, who reviewed it for the Electronic Intifada, called it an insightful look into the history of Israeli militarism and the military ethos that marks both state and society. Haim is currently working on a new book about the Greater Israel Project and how Israel is what he calls the chaos engine of Western imperialism. Haim, welcome to the Electronic Intifada live stream.
Thank you for having me, and more importantly, thank you for doing this crucial work of reporting the genocide every day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Haim, and our thanks to you too for your indefatigable support and solidarity. We are, as I said, going to talk more in the program later about the so-called 20-point plan for Gaza that Trump touts as a peace plan, but of course, which is a blueprint for continued genocide. In an article you wrote for the Electronic Intifada in February, Haim, you said that the US president's expressed intent at the time to expel all Palestinians from Gaza, rather, you wrote about that, quote, that it reminded of Adolf Hitler's infamous speech at the Reichstag on 30 June 1939, in which he called to resolve the terrible problem of Jewish refugees from the German Reich in July 1938. Hitler taunted the leaders of the West, and especially of the US, who refused to take any refugees. In many ways, Trump out-Hitlered Hitler in his press conference with Netanyahu last Wednesday. Like Hitler before him, he has attacked the most maligned group on earth, which now happens to be the Palestinian people. As I noted, you wrote that in February, but you could have written it yesterday. I just want you to comment on what we're seeing in the current so-called plan and what your reaction is to that now.
Well, this is called a peace plan. It is a colonial surrender plan. And interestingly, it is provided for the world to see and be horrified by, at a point where after 2 years, Israel has to admit that they cannot defeat Hamas. That in itself is quite an incredible fact, that the fourth strongest army in the world, supplied to the eyeballs by the West, by the whole bloody West, if I may speak in French. This is the result of destroying the whole of Gaza, the housing, the hospitals, the schools, the facilities of preserving life anywhere, including all infrastructure, killing probably what people are now thinking is north of 500,000 Palestinians, because the numbers supplied by Hamas are so partial that they stopped making sense now. And after that, after 2 years of this, with no country apart from a small group of governments who supported South Africa in the ICJ, no country stood up for the Palestinians. You know, both my parents survived Auschwitz, and I was brought up on a belief that if only people knew what was happening in the death camps, they would rise and stop it. Well, I was wrong. We now see the whole world surrendering to Israel and the United States. And now they want the poor people of Gaza, the heroic people of Gaza, the humane people of Gaza, they want them surrender. They want them dead. And this is either you sign on this line or I kill you all. This is not just a genocide in Gaza. This is a decline of humanity across the world, a decline of humanity and its ability to stop evil. And I think that this is even worse than the Holocaust caused by the Nazis for a number of reasons. One of them is the Nazi Holocaust, which, of course, we all are still terrified by, was not based on sadism, on cruelty. It was a functional genocide. And because it was so functional and so industrialized, it required very small numbers of people to kill huge numbers of people. It was totally mechanized with, the latest technology of the time, mainly killing by gas, and was very efficient. The major part of the population in Germany didn't even know about it. The whole thing was kept a secret for a reason, because they knew how wrong it was. So a small group of people acted in an industrial manner to kill more than 25 million people. About 5.5 million of those were Jews, but they were not the majority. And many others were killed not in the camps, but with a bullet to the head by an open tomb. Now, the genocide in Gaza is very different. It is very personal. It is actually done by hundreds of thousands of Israeli soldiers. This is the most democratic genocide that we have seen in our lifetime. This is the most technological genocide. This is the most televised genocide, and the most frightening one because of the role of sadism and brutality in actually sharing the horrors with your family, with your friends, and with people that you do not know, but you feel as a genocide the need to share it. This has not happened before. This is most terrifying because everyone in this world now knows what Israel is doing, and Israel is doing it also functionally. Not they are totally sadistic, but they don't do it because they are sadists. They are actually supporting the sadism of the soldiers on the ground, but they do it because they want every Palestinian out of Palestine. This is also a functional genocide, and its function is to empty Palestine. And this peace document is actually a way of finishing what the bombing, what the starvation, what the destruction has not managed to do. Trump is now stepping forward to help Israel where it failed. It failed to defeat Hamas, it failed to defeat the other groups, and it failed to defeat the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine who support them. But they have not failed in one task, and that is they have defeated the whole of humanity. Now, it's true that we have massive opposition, massive demonstrations, massive meetings everywhere, massive media intervention on social media. Hundreds of millions of people are being active. I was once one of 10 anti-Zionists in Britain. Today we have millions of Britons who are anti-Zionist, and for a reason. So the main achievement is the undermining of international law. I wouldn't say actually undermining, but actually exterminating, removing any evidence of international law, of shared humanity, of shared empathy between people, and actually calling this a humanitarian action. I think that is an achievement of some proportion. the sadism and brutality behind this achievement is unprecedented. That is a real achievement.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I mean, as you say, the sadistic nature, and just the relentless, psychotic violence that the state of Israel is carrying out and escalating day by day by day, hour by hour, across Gaza and the West Bank, and inside historic Palestine as well. It just the open, overt, nature of their plan. They brag about it. They boast about it. It's astonishing. Haim, in your book, An Army Like No Other, you chart the history of the so-called Israel Defense Forces and how it played a central role in forming the Israeli state and society and became its most powerful institution, in addition to the obvious fact that it is perpetrating genocide on a scale like we've never seen. What's your reading of the role that the Israeli army is playing within Israel today? Does it retain the same level of influence internally, or are there new centers of power dominating the Zionist regime?
I think it does. I want to mention some statistics. You would know, of course, because you covered it so many times and so brilliantly, that Israel is a divided society. It cannot be more divided than it is. It's riven with divisions, and it is now the stage of two elites fighting for domination. The old elite, which is the Ashkenazi Jews, from which group I'm coming from, and the new elite, which is created out of many groups, mostly the Mizrahim, the Arab Jews that were Zionized by Israel since 1948 and even before. A ragtag collection of right-wing Nazi groups who are now in government. Those two groups agree on very little, but the little they agree with each other is very crucial. They agree on the genocide. They agree on the need to remove Palestinians from their country. They agree on the method of doing that. And how do we know that? Because Israel is telling us very clearly in 2024, in March and April in 24, there were two Tel Aviv University polls, and both of them came with very interesting figures of support for the genocide. Overall, less than 3% of Israeli Jews, and I'm saying Israeli Jews because they didn't even ask Israeli Palestinians, in other words, Palestinian with Israeli citizens rather, for their views. They only asked Jews, and only about 2% of them were opposed to the genocide. The rest of the 97% were divided into two main groups. One group that said that the level of violence and brutality is just right in Gaza, and another group that had an improvement, and that improvement was, no, the level of violence is not enough, and we have to improve on that. We have to be more violent. So this is the kind of support that the army is still getting. And that's why I call the genocide truly democratic. It wasn't a subject for elections, but if it was, it'll get the same percentages. So the only national institution that most Israelis, I think 97% we can call most Israelis, support is the army. on everything else, they are totally divided. And if this process of depopulating Palestine was to stop, they would be at each other's throats because there will be nothing to hold them from killing each other. They hate each other, I think, probably as much as they hate the Palestinians. Israeli society is built on hate, on hatred, on the only language they understand is the language of force. They never negotiate. Actually, they use negotiations as a way of targeting the negotiators, as you have seen many, many times, and recently in Doha, when they tried to kill the negotiating team of Hamas. There is nothing to talk about for them. The only thing is to empty Palestine, and every method is now okay. So I think these are very untypical to conflicts elsewhere, and they are an invention of Israel. And it's very important that the army is so supported because it follows Israeli social changes. One of those changes is the religionization of the Israeli society. Israeli society is now one of the most religious on the planet. If in 1948, less than 15% of Israelis were religious Jews, now they are more than 2/3 of all Israelis. In London, where I live, the religious Christians are 5% of the population. In Israel, everywhere else, probably with the exception of the United States, religion is covering less and less of the population. In Israel, it is going up towards the 97% of the poll that I mentioned. In a poll of the Pew Institute in the United States, they prove a simple fact about Israel. The more religious you are, the more nationalistic you are, and the more you agree with the genocide. This was proven year after year by the Pew Institute. So I think basically the army has changed because 2/3 of the people now in the army are religious Jews. And I don't just mean people that go to a synagogue. I mean messianics with Jewish supremacism driving them, extra nationalists, fascists, and neo-Nazis that are defiling the Jewish religion, are defiling Jewish history. There is nothing Jewish about genocide. Jews have suffered genocide. They didn't do it to others. There is nothing Jewish about the brutality that the Jewish state is now, using against the Palestinians. There is nothing Jewish about the Jewish state. This is a fact. But like in other points in history, religion is used to flame and inflame, large groups. So the army followed society because it is taking its soldiers from society. It is now an army full of rabbis who are blessing the troops and the blood that they are, and justifying the brutalities. So the army has changed. It's much more religious. It's much more nationalistic, and yet it is functional in killing civilians, but it doesn't function when it has to fight people with arms in their hands, because these people are actually resisting seriously.
Let me ask you just sort of a little follow-up. Was it always like that? I mean, for many decades, there was this myth of the Israeli fighters as being very heroic, very skilled, just invincible. Was that always a myth, or is what we're seeing now, has that always been the reality of just cowards who murder babies and bomb hospitals and then wear the underwear of the women they've murdered?
Of course, this is, like shooting fish in a barrel, as somebody said. 2.5 million people ensconced in a huge concentration camp in Gaza. You shoot them, and this has become a sport, of course. Today we shoot people in the eye. Tomorrow we shoot people in the knee. You know about all those new sports developed by the IDF. But actually, this is not new. It is, Gaza was under attack every single year since 1948. Every single year. And Gaza, remember, is basically a collection of people from the rest of Palestine. Most of them have not been resident in Gaza before 1948. They come from every community in Palestine. I was living as a child in a flat of people from Jabalia that actually ended up in Jabalia because they were expelled by the Irgun in 1948. And the whole of Jabalia in Jaffa ended up in Jabalia in Gaza. And so did from people from all over the country. And so the attacks against those defenseless people in Gaza have started in 1948 and never ended. The different massacres that we know about, I mean, people know about Deir Yassin, but there were many massacres. They killed totally defenseless people. And until recently, they wouldn't admit it. Actually, thanks to Israeli historians like Ilan Pape, we know about Tantura, about the Waima, about all those massacres are now, facts. Sorry
to interrupt you, Haim, but the Israeli slogan today seems to be, the Nakba is a lie, but we'll do it to you again. They seem to say, we have many Israeli politicians who say, we'll do another Nakba to you. So they officially deny it while being absolutely proud of it at the same time. But Haim, I want to just kind of pan out a bit. I mean, these insights into Israeli society are incredibly valuable, but Israel also plays a global role and a role within U.S. empire. As I mentioned earlier, you, in the book you're working on, which we'd like to hear a little bit more about, you refer to Israel as the West's or the empire's chaos agent. Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, it's very simple. Zionism is not just fighting the people of Palestine. Zionism is fighting the people of West Asia. Israel is the only country that currently fights against 6 states. Now, most of these states have been made into basket cases, which is the task of Israel. And to put it in context, BRICS, in which China is very central, is, of course, has got very strong military because they have to, because of the United States and the West. But actually, what BRICS is known and what China is known for is building. What the West is known for is destroying, is exterminating. And Israel is the agent of this chaos. It is the agent of turning West Asia into a series of basket case states. Now, let's start from Iraq in 2003. And actually, of course, starting in 1991, in the first Iraq war, which was the model for what followed. Lebanon, the number of times Israel destroyed Beirut and the south of Lebanon is, I don't even remember it now. And they plan to do it again. Now, Lebanon is a basket case. It's not a functioning society anymore. If Hezbollah was not offering some defense to Lebanon, it would have been taken over a long time ago. Syria is obviously one of the worst basket cases states that we have ever seen. I'm not even mentioning Iraq, that goes without saying, because that's worked out the model. Yemen, the West, the Gulf countries, and Israel, and especially the United States, of course, fought Yemen into the ground. It is the most damaged country, and yet it still is a center of resistance. It's a symbol that we should think about and follow. The Horn of Africa is destroyed beyond repair. Libya is not a state anymore, as you know. And now they are planning further afield. Turkey was warned that it's going to be attacked, probably in Cyprus, and there is a lot of reporting about that. The Israelis are involved in the Baluchi struggle against the Pakistan regime. Imagine that. This is few thousand miles from the Democratic Republic of Genocide. And then, of course, is the big target of Iran that they plan to destroy even before Christmas, if the reports are true. And I am sorry to say, yes, I think they are. So this is an engine of chaos in West Asia and in the Middle East, serving the declining empires of the West, because they are declining. And when empires decline, they are the most dangerous animals to confront. So this is what is the basis for my research and writing in the book.
I can't wait to read it, and also bracing for, just how horrific everything is when it's condensed in that kind of work. So
and please don't forget, Gaza is the is the theater of horror, which is an example to everyone in the Middle East that still think that they should be independent and should be free. This is the example held to everyone in the Middle East. Do what we tell you, or this we will bring Gaza home. Yeah, and they actually speak like that in Jenin and in the West Bank on the whole, saying, if you don't behave yourself, you shall have Gaza. And they are already having a bit of Gaza there.
Yeah, absolutely. In November of last year, you were a victim of the increasing repression of the British state against Palestine solidarity activists. You gave a speech at a demonstration near the official residence of Israeli Ambassador 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿. Police listened to that speech and then accused you of hate speech and arrested you using so-called anti-terror laws soon after. Let's play a short clip of what you said in that speech, and then tell us how long you were held for and what happened.
As Israel cannot celebrate either. It has not achieved any of its declared aims, either in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Iran, or anywhere else. What has it achieved? Murder, mayhem, genocide, racism, destruction. This is what they're good at. They're really good at killing babies. They're really good. at killing women and old men, but they cannot fight the resistance. They have lost every single time. Now, Israel has won a number of wars against very big and successful armies. You remember that. They cannot win against Hamas. They cannot win against Hezbollah. They cannot win against the Houthis. They cannot win against the united resistance to the genocide that they have started.
So because of that, the so-called anti-terror laws were applied against you. What happened? And tell us, just walk us through what happened.
I don't want to talk too much about it because we're facing in Gaza something which is really so terrifying that what they do to us in the West is really, small feed.
Yeah.
Of course, they're trying to silence us, to silence people who are speaking in support of the rights of the people of Palestine and against Zionism and its evils. And they will not succeed in doing so. They have charged, when I was arrested for under terror charges, I was the second or the first person, and there were less than 5 of us. There are now 1,700 people waiting to go to court accused of being terrorists because they sat with a piece of paper saying, I am against the genocide and I support Palestine action. That is what they have done. For the West, and especially for the United Kingdom, the source of the problems of Palestine, the source of the support for over a century for the Zionist project, that this evil society, this evil empire that has destroyed many places on this earth for hundreds of years, the last destruction that they have come up with in 1916 is of Palestine. This is the last colony of the British Empire. And this goes into the 21st century? I mean, is this real? Are these people for real? They support settler colonialism in 2025? They arm it. They fly missions against the people of Gaza in support of providing, targets for the Israeli, the Israeli Air Force, the force of murder. Yeah. So I think that they cannot defeat us. They cannot silence us. They can punish us like they tried to punish me, and they try to punish all of us. We will rather go to jail than shut up. We will not shut up until Palestine is free, until everyone in Palestine is free. And this plan will not lead to a free Palestine. We know that. This plan is trying to pacify people in the countries of the West and in the Arab East in order to continue the genocide by other means, by means which are less repulsive, but just as effective. And they think that they have frightened the Palestinians enough now, but they didn't stop the genocide. They haven't for a moment stopped the genocide. So I think we will not be cowed. We will not be silenced. And they can arrest as many people as they want. There is a demonstration on the 11th of October, which is it's almost 2 years and 4 days after the beginning of this genocide. And actually, there are already more than 1,500 people that said that they will sit to be arrested. The courts will be full. There are no prisons to take all these thousands of pensioners like me who are fighting an evil government of war criminals. This will not win.
Haim, it's uplifting to hear you, the determination in your voice, and I know that you are joined by so many people. We see all the time the videos of Keir Starmer's police arresting people for opposing genocide while the British government continues to support and finance and fund and arm this genocide. It's absolutely perverse. We live in a topsy-turvy world where right is considered wrong and evil is considered good. And we are so grateful to you for fighting it in so many ways, intellectually, through your academic work, through putting your own freedom on the line by going out to protest. If people want to learn more about what you're doing on October 11th, how can they learn about that?
I shall send you the links later today.
All right.
We will be everywhere in Britain, and we will speak with one voice against the genocide and against the government that supports this genocide.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today, Haim Bresheeth-Zabner. We would love to have you back soon, especially when your new book comes out. There is so much more to talk about with you, and we're so grateful for all the insights you gave us today.
Thank you so much, Haim.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work.
I don't know what to say. He's so brilliant and articulate, and just the plain language that needs to be used when we talk about what we're seeing and what Israel is and has always been, and
that's what they arrest you for. That's what they arrest you for now, for speaking the truth.
Right. Well, and Haim also was talking about the resistance and how Israel, with all of its might and its sadistic, psychotic torture, is not able to defeat the Palestinians on the ground, the Yemenis, who are consistently the only nation right now that is fulfilling its international legal obligations to stop a genocide. So let's bring Jon on to talk more about resistance. Hi, Jon.
Hi, guys. Great interview.
Yeah. Really.
And such good historical context for what
Absolutely.
we're seeing now.
Definitely.
Yeah. So another horrific week in Gaza, but the resistance has not let up, especially in northern Gaza, where Israel is claiming that they have, completely defeated the resistance, of course.
We're seeing more operations right now in Gaza City than we have seen at any point in the last year and a half anywhere. So
incredible. All right, well, take it away. Thanks, Jon.
All right, let's do it. All right, so you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 727 of Israel's genocide. As always, we're going to start with these maps because the war is based on ethnic cleansing, and these maps show that. You're looking at a map from the International Organization of Migration and the Migration Cluster, which involves the United Nations organizations, the Danish and Norwegian refugee councils. And we're looking at, from each of the neighborhoods of Gaza City, we're looking at, on this map, dozens of arrows pointing from the neighborhoods in Gaza City down into the central area, the middle camps, Deir al-Balah, and down into the south, into Khan Yunis in the Mawasi area. These were areas that the Israeli military said were safe zones. And as Nora reported off the top of the show, they're clearly not. They're killing people in these so-called safe zones. every single day in their tents on the side of the road. People leaving are being killed on the roads. People's tents are being burnt in those middle areas. Attacks on the middle areas are consistent. And those were expressly told to the Palestinians in Gaza City in messages from the Israelis that clearly articulated areas that they could go to that they would be safe in. And those are updated from the moment of the evacuation orders from Gaza City. They're not old. They were fresh maps. They showed the coordinates on the maps. And then what we've seen for the last 3 weeks is those places are targeted as well. You can see on the top there that the IOM has the number at 446,000 people have left Gaza City. The Israeli military puts that number at over 800,000, and they have now, over the past week, stopped reporting on the number of people leaving Gaza City because, as Nora also reported, they are moving to close the Al Rashid coastal road to people leaving to go back north. So no supplies can move back up north, and then there's going to be a checkpoint on that coastal road. And as we know from the Rafah evacuation, if there is a checkpoint, people are not going to leave through that checkpoint, because those checkpoints are where you get captured for no reason and you get taken to a torture camp in Israel in the desert, maybe Sidi Tamam. There's other ones, and you be tortured to death with no legal recourse. Your family doesn't even know where you are. And so people don't want to walk into a situation where they're going to be taken to a torture camp. It's pretty logical. But what it means is that the people in Gaza City will be staying in Gaza City. And that is what the defense minister announced this week. The Israeli military each day is still giving the number of airstrikes, 140 to 160. So we're looking at about 1,200 a week. And that comes in the past 2 weeks after the first 4 days of the operation, where they bragged about 1,200 airstrikes in the first 3 and a bit days. And the coastal road being closed is going to have a significant impact on the resources of people in the north. And that situation, which was announced last night, is a devastating announcement for the civilian population. Let's take a look at these next couple of things. Netanyahu spoke at the United Nations on Friday. It was kind of like an evil clown show. He wore a QR code on his lapel pin that you could see atrocities, their atrocity propaganda that they think will tell the whole world that it's justifies a genocide of 2 million people. But also, sadistically, they brought these trucks. We're looking at photographs from the Israeli military, from inside a military truck, photographing 3 flatbed trucks carrying massive speaker systems that are being taken into Gaza. These were driven into Gaza by the military and taken into Gaza City in order to project Netanyahu's speech, which was to a virtually empty auditorium at the United Nations, because everybody walked out of that. That he wanted everyone in Gaza City to listen to his speech, at which in the speech he said the war will continue, which he also said after the meeting with Trump about the so-called surrender plan. He gave a Hebrew message that said that the war would go on as well. So inconsistency from the genocidaires. But if we look at the next picture, you can also see this is, we're looking at a crane lifting those speakers up to broadcast that speech. And just a note, because I cover Army radio's dispatches, and they make up a certain portion of the work on the Resistance Report, I thought that I would mention that the Army radio reporter, military correspondent, said, when foreign diplomats leave the hall one after another, speaking of the United Nations hall, they are not spitting in Netanyahu's face, they are spitting in the face of the state of Israel. So that's how they felt about that, which is probably true, what they were doing. Also, they, not just these speakers, but they sent SMS messages to people with audio snippets from the speech. So just really sadistic things going on that Haim was talking about in the previous segment. Ziad Nakala, who is the Islamic Jihad Secretary General, he kind of cut to the core of this Netanyahu clown show. Netanyahu's threats against the resistance and the Palestinian people at the United Nations are not new to our people and our resistance. The Palestinian people who have raised the banner of resistance for more than 100 years will not be affected by the threats and lies, and we will remain loyal to our history and to our martyrs. We will not surrender to criminal killers. We will not relinquish our rights, no matter the sacrifices. And he spoke later about the Trump plan, and he rightly said, with this, Israel is trying to impose through the United States what it cannot achieve on the battlefield. Of course, that is strictly true. The objectives of Israel's war have failed, all four of them. They continue to fail. We're now in Gideon's Chariots 2, and the IDF admitted, as I reported some weeks ago, that Gideon's Chariots 1 was a failure. So they're trying it again, repackaging it as Gideon's Chariots B or Part 2. But let's take a look at that battle. We'll move to the Battle of Gaza City. And this is the map to get you situated. So the red at the bottom there, that's a bit cut off. That's the Netzarim corridor. So in Tel El Hawa, to the left, bottom left of that map, that is the area where the checkpoint will be set up, and people will not be able to leave Gaza City without going through that checkpoint. The battle in Tel El Hawa right now is significant because we know that during Gideon's Chariots Part 1, Zaytun, Shujaiya, and Tufa were the targets. Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia up in the north, further north, also the targets. But right now, the main centers of battle are Tel El Hawa and Al Ramal in the downtown area of Gaza City, and in the western edge of Jabalia in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood. This is the downtown core of Gaza City. It's the center of urban life in the Strip. It's been largely destroyed. It was destroyed. Largely destroyed over the course of the last 2 years, but also in the first battle of Gaza City, where Israel said they took full control, they defeated the Gaza Brigade, all that stuff that they say that are just simply not true. But yesterday, or on Monday, there was another breaching operation in Gaza City. The Army radio reports that 5 IDF soldiers, including 2 officers, were seriously wounded and 6 others injured in a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 attack on an army encampment in Gaza City earlier today. The incident began around 5:20 p.m. when a cell of 5 𝐓𝐡𝐞 operatives infiltrated an army encampment, setting off 2 explosive devices against tanks of the 7th Armored Brigade. 3 of the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters managed to escape the attack, return to their base safely. And just interestingly, this is 𝐓𝐡𝐞's breakdown of it. Yesterday afternoon, Monday, al-𝐓𝐡 fighters managed to raid a gathering of Israeli army soldiers and vehicles inside the Rosary Sisters School. The IDF is using a elementary school as a base in Tel El Hawa, south of Gaza City. Our fighters opened fire from point-blank range towards the Israeli enemy soldiers, killing and wounding them. A number of our fighters also threw explosive devices inside the 2 Israeli military personnel carriers, armored personnel carriers, and a Merkava tank was hit with a guerrilla action device. So you can see that the reporting of both of those are very consistent. We've seen that all throughout the war. These reports that 𝐓𝐡 issues are accurate, and we're going to see another solid example of that today. But let's take a look at a couple operations in Gaza City. This is an attack that we are all familiar with at this point. Yasin strike on a Merkava tank there that you can see. And yesterday, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞 had a significant operation. Maybe we can just loop that video around for 1 sec here. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞 said, we carried out a qualitative operation by detonating a house that had been booby-trapped and rigged with explosives in the Al Nasser neighborhood of Gaza City, with a number of locally made explosives and others from the enemy remnants that were reverse engineered. Return to sender operation. The house was detonated while a Zionist engineering force entered the place with the aim of booby trapping and detonating it. The resistance drone participated in the qualitative operation. So we may have drone footage of this, but I think that it is reasonable to surmise at this point in the battle that there's a shortage of cameras. The videos were never a significant portion of the operations, but at this point, you can imagine that there are fewer cameras, but it doesn't seem that there are fewer weapons. So this is definitely something that we will have to keep track of for this Battle of Gaza City, which is intended to be a long battle. Chief of Staff 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐿 said the other day that every advance of the Israeli military is slow. There's no rush to the targets in the first part of the maneuver. The pace is very slow intentionally to maintain the security of the forces, so to protect their forces. He said the IDF is currently establishing defenders in the city, bases, outposts in the city to repel raids, and 3 large logistics centers inside Gaza City for the benefit of 3 maneuvering divisions. Fuel and water lines will be connected to them, and apparently also a desalination plant. This means they're preparing for many months of activity well into 2026 is the prediction from the Israeli military in that situation. So that is the battle in Gaza City. Just to give you a sense, what I was saying to Nora earlier, we're looking at about 150% of the attack tempo that we saw in Khan Yunis in Gaza City. This week alone, 26 Yasin strikes against vehicles, 5 guerrilla action devices hand-delivered, 15 IEDs against tanks, 2 booby-trapped homes, 5 close quarters battles, 3 sniper operations, and 26 rocket and artillery operations. So 55 plus operations, qualitative operations this week, plus the 26 more artillery and rocket operations. Those are carried out largely by the Joint Operations Room. The other factions are all involved in this. And in the coming weeks, we'll show you some of their artillery videos, but the Popular Front was involved. The Democratic Front has been involved. The Mujahideen brigades have been involved. And 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 and 𝐶ASAM also have artillery units that have been at play this week. And so that makes sense because the Israeli military is staying back from the frontline combat, although they admit that they are in combat every day. That same report from the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 correspondent quoting these Golani Brigade fighters that Hamas gunmen are emerging from tunnel shafts every day of the battle. These clashes are occurring constantly throughout the 2 weeks of Gideon's chariot. So the Israeli numbers seem to match the Palestinian numbers in this case. Significant tempo of operations that are happening early in this battle of Gaza City, and there will be a consistent. Obviously, the resistance at this point knows that they need to be prepared for a many-month battle. So I think you'll see that there isn't an operational spike at the beginning, but they'll wait till the Israelis are in position and attack them in those positions. So this week, we got footage of a resistance operation that I reported at length a month ago. The operation was on the 20th of August. So this is kind of like the ultimate fact check when we report on these stories, and then the resistance drops a video a month later. And fortunately, our reporting was tight, and the resistance video matched their reporting and largely matches the Israeli reporting. So let's take a look at that because it's in Khan Yunis. The first map, number 20 here, is the 2 corridors. So this is what the Israeli military boasted about were their achievements in the Battle of Khan Yunis. They cut these 2 corridors, the Morag corridor that you're seeing running from east to west, that cuts off Rafah. Rafah's on the left, and Khan Yunis, eastern Khan Yunis, is on the right. And that's a corridor that goes to where a settlement was. It didn't take any military accomplishments to achieve that corridor. It was farmland that was already destroyed by the Israelis. But it was farmland because before 2005, there was Israeli settlers in the Morag settlement there. And the Magen Oz corridor is what they cut during Gideon's Chariots Part A. And you can see it there running from north to south, and it splits Khan Yunis from the western Khan Yunis from eastern Khan Yunis. And western Khan Yunis is where the camp and the city are. Eastern Khan Yunis is spread out by farmland. Again, it's possible to make these corridors, but it's important to note this because this corridor is newly established, and this is where the Israelis have control. They don't really have control in the area where you see Morag corridor listed there, in that whole blue area of Eastern Khan Yunis. They don't have operational control in that area. We reported on that for months during the second battle of Khan Yunis in the past several months. They clearly don't have control over that area. But these corridors are their quote unquote military accomplishments. So the fact that they're being hit is significant. Like I said, this operation was on the 20th of August. Let's take a look at the demolitions, because this is the number 21 shows you how the Israelis operated. They just mass destroyed along this corridor. That's how the corridor was made. So you're seeing Khan Yunis on the left of that map. That's the city and the camps beside it, further west. And that is a corridor that has been cut by demolishing buildings. So that was their that's what they did. They didn't fight the resistance in Gideon's Chariots A. They said they weren't going to fight the resistance. They said they were going to fight infrastructure. So they destroyed people's houses and created these corridors. All of this to set up this operation, because this operation takes place in this corridor, in the one area, the strip of area that the Israelis believe that they have control over. The 𝐓𝐡𝐞 field report was accurate. Again, Al-Qassam fighters stormed this morning a new IDF position and targeted a number of Merkava Guard tanks with several Shawad explosive devices. Those are the EFPs that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 makes, guerrilla action devices, and Al Yassin 105 shells. Al-Qassam fighters also targeted a number of houses where occupation soldiers were fortified, hitting them with 6 anti-fortification and anti-personnel shells. And machine gun fire. A number of fighters stormed the house at point-blank range with light weapons and hand grenades. The attack continued for several hours, and our fighters observed helicopters landing for the evacuation. At the beginning of the attack, according to Army radio, at the beginning of the attack, the Palestinians fired at the observation camera and hit it, so observation was less effective. And the Israeli soldiers discovered that the infiltration had happened only after the raiders, the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 raiders, hit the army outpost. So key details about that. We go to the next slide. Is the commander of the operation. He gave a briefing. You can see him here again holding captured Israeli Defense Forces weaponry. That's a Tavor X95, the bullpup rifle that he's got in his hands, and beside it it's an M16, but it seems like it's got an M4 barrel on it, but that's just a modification that the Israeli military makes, showing that it's a captured weapon. Both of those weapons are captured, and 𝐓𝐡𝐞 has shown these captured weapons at all kinds of points. After the resistance leadership, this is what the commander says, after the resistance leadership studied the enemy's behavior and its ground movements inside the Gaza Strip, specifically establishing a new combat position within population centers from which they launch attacks against our people, the enemy neglected that the resistance was closely monitoring them. Despite the enemy's complete air superiority and ground surveillance, our fighters were able to monitor enemy forces from the very first moments of the new site's establishment. So this is the establishment of an outpost, of a base, essentially forward operating base inside the Magen Oz corridor. The enemy failed to detect the presence of our fighters, and the opening of the tunnel was used 4 times in a row. So they used a tunnel that the Israelis said they had decommissioned. They used the eye of that tunnel 4 times. The site of the operation and the collection of accurate details was gathered precisely 1 day before executing the operation. So significant intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, which we will see in this next slide that shows that operation, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aspect of that operation. The commander is articulating right now what I already told you that he said, and you can see him there again with his weapons. But here we're seeing drone footage now, again, resistance drone footage being used in these operations. These are qualitative operations. That's showing where the base, the forward operating base is. And you can see there's just destruction all around it. So the Israelis believe that by destroying everything around these areas, the resistance won't be able to move. But we're watching right now on camera, the resistance move using tunnels, being able to access there. They're looking at one of the positions. You can see that the blanket in the window is the new soldiers in a window, the only blanket in a window in a house. And there's the camera right there that they shot out. And because they shot out that camera at the beginning of the operation, the Israelis actually don't have strong numbers about how many people participated in the operation. The numbers range from 15 to 25, but they don't fully know, because by the time they understood the operation was happening, the fighters were already on top of them. We can look at that in number 24 here, when the fighters are emerging from the tunnel. So you can see them passing out there. There's the Yassins that are being passed out. There's a stretcher being passed out to capture a soldier. There's a guerrilla action device. And look at this massive hole in the ground. This is how the Israelis believe that they destroyed this tunnel, by digging this hole. They give this idea that they're in the tunnels fighting and trying to save their captives. They're not. When they find a tunnel, they bring in their bulldozers and their excavators, and they dig this hole. This hole looks like it's at least 10 stories down. I mean, it could be more. You can see the fighters walking up, and they're cloaked. But that's the way that Israel believes that they're destroying these tunnels, is by breaking it in half at one point in the tunnel. But we know that the tunnels are a spider web, and the fighters can simply move through the part that's been broken to access the rest of the tunnel network, or use a bypass to just go around these holes. So just giving you a sense of like how massive this hole is, and how futile this Israeli attempt to avoid fighting in tunnels, because the Israeli infantry is not allowed to fight in tunnels. There's only a small group of Yahalom tunnel unit fighters that are able to fight in tunnels. If infantry, soldiers, armored brigades find a tunnel, they flag it, and that's it. They take a selfie with it. They've said this before, and they wait for the Yahalom unit. They don't go into the tunnels. They're not in the tunnels fighting. The Yahalom unit's not in the tunnels fighting either, but definitely the infantry is not. We can look at the next slide here, because I broke down each part of this. So this is the stretcher. The Israelis saw this as well from their drone footage later, but this is a soldier capture operation, just as 𝐓𝐡𝐞 told us would happen in this next stage of the war. Their goal was to make these operations high qualitative operations, high quality operations that bring the fight directly to the Israelis, with the goal of capturing soldiers. So we can see in the next slide here, you're going to see the guerrilla action device. There you can see the bark. So the strategy is to bring these weapons, which didn't exist, that you can see it, the fighters holding it there, the orange canister that he's holding there, a smaller 𝐓𝐡𝐞 essentially. This was built more than a year into the war to carry out this next stage of operations. And these operations that the Israelis have discovered, the resistance discovered about the Israelis, is that they can get close to these tanks. They can get right up beside these tanks. And if you have a lighter canister than the 𝐓𝐡𝐞, which is heavy, if you have a lighter canister, you can simply drop these right down through the open hatches of their vehicles. And that is what we have been seeing, which is a much higher percentage operation than firing a Yassin 105 at a tank, which sometimes penetrates the tank and kills the crew. We know lots of stories of that, and that's how most of the Israelis have been killed in this battle, in this war in Gaza, in the genocide. But not all the time, because the tanks are well protected. But this guerrilla action device, delivered through the hatch, carried into an intimate setting, with the full control of the fighter to pick the spot to hit. This is an adaptation that the resistance has made, and I think it's remarkable that they're able to build these weapons as the war is going on. So that's what we're seeing there on this slide. The next slide is them coming up the hill, and you can see again just how deep that hole is. You can see the fighter there with his Yasin 105. He's got his AK on his back, and then you can see the guerrilla action device. It's easy to carry. When we saw them with the Shawad, they're a lot heavier and they're harder to move. So these fighters have a harder time using them in the open spaces that have been created by the genocide. Israel's eliminated all of the buildings around all of these areas that make the fighters have to pass through open areas. We can see the next one is a similar one of that. These are the fighters cloaking themselves. And this is something that we know has vexed the Israelis. These fighters, the fighter on the right there, you can barely see that that's a person. And the one on the left is very similar. And the Israeli drones don't pick them up with these cloaks. And also, just to look at that picture, it just puts lie to every snuff video that the Israelis have shown about killing fighters who are walking in groups of 3 and 4, clearly families and friends, not fighters. This is what the fighters look like. And Israel massacres them with drone strikes and then puts out the video and says, oh, we killed Hamas fighters. It's ridiculous. This is how the fighters fight. If you're seeing a group of 4 people of different sizes, you're probably seeing a family and kids getting wiped out by a drone strike that Israel then brags about. We could look at the next one, has the same kind of thing on this one. You wouldn't even see that guy when you're coming over top. He's got the same colors on as the ground that he's holding, and he's in position there. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 broke up into 3 teams on this operation to raid this Israeli base. And these guys here, the guy you're seeing there, he's suppressing fire on the hilltop at the top of the massive hole, I guess. It's not a hill, it's a hole. And he's providing covering fire. And the next slide, you'll see the archer there. He's got, looks like an F7, which is a North Korean fragmentation warhead, which is what 𝐓𝐡𝐞 said was used. And also they used thermobaric warheads, they're TBGs, that are built in Gaza. Unfortunately, they can't make the cameras in Gaza right now, so that I think we'll have to track that going forward. And now let's watch them get into position here. Oh yeah, the closer up one. Nice, tomorrow. So now here we see them moving across. And again, all these buildings are destroyed, so the fighting in the alleys has been removed because there's no alleys anymore. But the fighters, you can clearly see, they make it right up to the position. You can see the guerrilla action device being carried there. And this fighter says, I ask God to grant us success for this work, and that this work be revenge for all the martyrs, all our martyrs, from our leaders and our soldiers to all the sons and daughters of Palestine. You can see the stretcher there that he's got beside him. And they're accessing this point from a different tunnel. So they're using the same tunnel, but they have different ways out of it. And again, look at all that open space. Israel destroys that. I showed you that in the map to set this operation up. They destroy this massive 15-kilometer wide, 15-kilometer long tunnel corridor that you can see the tunnel there actually in that shot. You can see the tube of the tunnel coming up. Maybe we'll loop it one more time. But Israel believes if they destroy all of the buildings, that the fighters will have to move through open space, which will allow them to be targeted by drone strikes, which is what we see happening, because the Israelis are not on the ground fighting face to face. They have not been doing that at any point in this war. They're always zipped up in their armor. But this is one of the teams. So they split into 3 teams. See, watch here when he comes up. See there, that concrete at the top there, that's the tunnel exit point. So he's exiting from a different spot than everybody else in the middle of that tunnel. And they're approaching the base. And there was 3 teams approaching the base, and we lost contact with one of the teams. Those fighters were killed, and we saw them. They were the ones who were taking on the tanks that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 said, and that unit was killed taking on the tanks. And the Israelis published a video of the tanks running over one of the fighters, and that was how they celebrated this, what was otherwise a total defeat of their forces in this raid. They tried to, they think that shows some kind of strength to have a tank run over a wounded fighter. These are basic war crimes that, because of this totality of Israel's crimes, get kind of left behind for all the others. Let's look at the next slide here. So what we're going to see here is you can see how many fighters are taking, because this is different than all of the fighters that we've seen before. But you're going to see two fighters here in the blur. They're going to join, and the guy on camera says that here is the commander of our mission, and he says our leader, and it's beeped out. So presumably the guy on the right there is their leader. Whether that means he's the battalion commander or what, we haven't had full response from 𝐄𝐿 on that. They are still not officially acknowledging their cadre when they're killed, and that has been consistent. But he says here, he says our leaders before our soldiers, which is the motto that we've heard from 𝐶𝐿 throughout this war. We offer our leaders before our soldiers. This is a common movement motto. So I'm going to show you this next slide. This next video is going to have audio in it, so just a heads up, they're shooting. But just to give you a sense of what this operation sounded like without my description. So they're right up to the door. They get right up to the door on this operation. The Israelis do not come out to fight them. They've managed to cross that distance, and there you're seeing on the screen, those are the Yassin thermobarics and the F-7 rockets being fired on the position. There was 6 of them. The Israelis said that as well, and we can watch all 6 of them there. And if we look at the next slide, you can see the continuation of the storming here. They're right in the staircase of the building where the soldiers are inside. You can hear the screaming of the soldiers as they're being attacked here by fighters throwing grenades at them. And then you can see there, you see the rocket, the RPG fire. So real significant operation. These fighters are right outside the door. The Israelis are not coming to the door to challenge them. In effect, they're going to allow them to walk right inside rather than come out and fight. And that's just another layer of the cowardice that we've seen from the Israelis all throughout this war. And this operation really puts lie to a lot of things that Israelis believe. And because it's happening in these corridors, these are foreshadowing for the potential of an occupation in Gaza. Israel believes that if they're in these corridors, they're safe, and the resistance clearly shows that that is not the case. The next slide is the mortar teams here. The mortar teams provide cover. There was a bunch of these guys providing cover on the outside, and for cover for the withdrawal, which you just saw in that previous slide. So let's take a look at the tunnel, because they get back to the tunnel, and you can see this fighter jumping down, and you see on the left, the guy comes out, what seems like comes out of the dirt. Watch on the left. See, he's coming from the rest of the tunnel. So they dig this hole in the tunnel, and they believe that by digging this hole that they have broken the tunnel. But watch that guy. He just emerges through the other part of the tunnel, and all these guys jump back into the tunnel safely. There was drone footage of at least 2 of the fighters were killed at this stage of the fight, because the Israelis aren't fighting them face to face. They fought them with tank shells, and they fought them with drones. And the guys who were asleep in the building that got raided, they didn't jump up and defend the building. They didn't come out into the staircase and fight. They had no idea how many people were behind them, and they were willing to just allow. If there had been 50 fighters would have entered without them coming out. So just remarkable to see the way the tunnel network works, and why it's a failure to just dig a hole and think you've defeated it. We can show that with the next one too tomorrow. Because there you see the fighter emerging or exiting egressing, and you can see the tunnel arch there. So even though the Israelis come in and they smash it with that bulldozer, you've got an arch like that holds, and that is why the tunnels are so well constructed. They rely upon that arch, that all of the digging, the destruction all around it, and that arch is still in place. And in this next slide, you'll see the fighter standing in the tunnel. That's right there in that tunnel. And this fighter salutes Mohammed al-Deif, Abu Khalid, and he says that this operation is from him and for him in this. The Israeli military said 3 seriously wounded in this operation, but as we'll watch in the next slide, you can see the medevac helicopters. There's more medevacs than that, but those numbers, especially of the numbers of wounded, I think are really sketchy from the Israeli side. And who knows what this base is? If this base was a special forces base, the Israelis don't count their special forces soldiers in their death toll. So there's lots of still questions about this. But you can see the burning, and there's the medevac helicopter landing. That's the third one, taking off again there in this area that's completely destroyed. So a pretty significant operation, many layers to it. And it's able to take place in this defensive position in this corridor. They didn't capture a soldier. If they had have captured a soldier, it might have turned the war. But these are the operations that we're seeing at this point in the war. Highly well-trained, skilled fighters executing really significant raids that involve multiple layers of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And then it requires a quality of fighter to execute that raid. And that's not the only one, because if we look at this last one, I showed you this on the show in July, because this was also on the Magen Oz corridor, and there was at least 12 fighters came out of a tunnel. Not clear if it was the exact same tunnel, but came out, same deal, came out with stretchers, were ready to capture Israeli soldiers, but the drones hit the air, and the drones are above them. And in this picture, there's 8 fighters. So it gives you a sense of what we're looking at when they camouflage like that. And this was a previous operation in July. So they're repeatedly doing the resistance is repeatedly doing what they said they were going to do, which was capture soldiers, carry out high-level operations like this, and operations that could turn the war at any point. And that Khan Yunis operation was one of those operations. So that is the resistance report for day 727 of this war. And of course, we will be following the Gaza City battle on this program very closely, as we have throughout the war.
Wow. Thank you so much, John. So much happened this week, and that footage from last month's battle, extraordinary. I mean, it's just, again, like the use of the tunnels, still after all, 24 months of this genocide. It's stunning.
Do you remember on the first shows when I remember Ali asking me, like, are they getting the tunnels? Like they're saying they're getting, and they're saying they're getting a kilometer of tunnels. Like, we don't hear any of that. We haven't heard any of that in 18 months. They're not even pretending that they're fighting.
They were going to flood the tunnels. And
That's right. Gas the tunnels, right.
And then they told us at one point, they said they destroyed 80% of the tunnels.
Right.
But then when the truth came out, they're very open about 80% of the tunnels not being destroyed. So, and there can be rebuilt. Again, this is the whole logic of the tunnel, is that it's not a straight thoroughfare. It is a spider's web. Yeah. So if you even if you did destroy 20% of the tunnels, it doesn't impede the tunnel process. It just, the digging goes a different direction and they reconnect it. If you drop a house on top of one of their tunnel exits that they were planning to use, and it can't be used anymore, they'll simply dig up another tunnel. And that's the soil in Gaza allows them to do that. And the decades of knowledge and engineering that they have allows them to do that. And that's why we see it. And that's why we see the IDF reporting that fighters are popping out of tunnels all over Gaza City and fighting them every day.
Incredible. Well, thanks for that.
And this will be seen as historic.
Yeah.
When it's over, when Israel is no more, when those who are aiding and abetting this genocide are forgotten or only remembered with disgust and contempt that they deserve, then people will, just as they remember the resistance in Vietnam, I think this will be one of those historic stories.
The tourists to Palestine will go to visit the tunnels in Gaza like they do to go to visit the tunnels in Vietnam.
That's right.
Yeah, one of the commanders said that he was talking to Mohammed Sinwar, who was at one point the Khan Yunis Brigade commander, then the Southern Division commander. He said in a conversation, he reminded him in the weeks before this operation that maybe months before the operation, that we are a military academy demonstrating to the entire world. Yeah. So they certainly did that. That's a pretty remarkable operation. To cover the distance in the open space is something that we weren't sure early in the war how they were going to do that. And now we've seen it.
Wow. Well, thank you, Jon, for that, as always. I don't know how to segue into this, but we go from, valiant resistance to a genocide to the West's insistence that Palestinians just surrender.
Not just the West, also the Arab and Muslim vassals and servants of the West.
That's right. The aspirational too. West.
Yeah.
Right. So, Ali, take us through, if you can do it without, vomiting, because it's so depraved and just so gross, what this 20-point plan is, and any updates to it in the last even couple of months.
There's so many angles we can come at this from. And over the last day and all day, I've been thinking about how I want to talk about this. And everyone is, I didn't even want to talk about it because I don't take this seriously. But at the same time, we have to know what's here and what's going on. So let's start from there, from what is said, and then we'll talk about some of the context and meaning. And I don't look at this primarily as a plan, a serious plan, and let's look at it and see what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. That's not the way to look at it. This is more about trying to understand the mindset of those trying to impose it and what it tells us about their understanding of the reality. And I think what Haim Bresheeth-Zabner said earlier in the program, he made a point that was, I think, crucial here, and I think is backed up by Jon's presentation this week and every week, which is that after 2 years, now we're almost into the third year of this genocide, Israel has been unable to defeat the resistance, despite all its boasts, despite having the entire united backing of Western barbarism and Arab vassalage and treachery behind it. Israel has been unable to defeat this resistance. So that's the context we start with. So let's take a look at the so-called 20-point plan. And this has been published in various places. I'm just pointing to the Al Jazeera one because there's no paywall. So if people want to read it, it's easy to find. But point number one, we'll just go through. I'll try to go through as quickly as we can. And Jon, Asa, Nora, when you just come in when you have a comment on it. But I just made some notes on each of these points. So number one, Gaza will be a de-radicalized, terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. So that encapsulates the starting logic of this, that it is the victims of genocide and not those who are perpetrating genocide who are the problem and who are the threat. And That's the starting point here. Not Zionism, not Israel, but the Palestinian people too. Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza who have suffered more than enough. So who has made them suffer? Who is doing this to them? They don't tell us, but I think we all know. 3, if both sides agree to this proposal, the war will immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to the agreed upon line to prepare for a hostage release. And they say that bombardment, etc., will be frozen and the battle lines will remain frozen until conditions are met for the complete staged withdrawal. Now, that's important, until conditions are met. We'll come back to that. And then they say within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be returned. So Israel gets everyone up front. And then once Israel has got everything it wants, Israel will release 250 life sentence Palestinian prisoners plus 1,700 Gazans who are detained since October 7th, including all women and children. So
a key line in the previous paragraph was the agreed upon line, which is ambiguous, but it seems pretty clear that that line is within Gaza itself from the maps that have been released. Right?
Yeah, we'll come back to this. This is because this plan elaborates on that later. But just on this point of detainees, it says Israel will release all the detainees taken since October 7th, including all women and children detained in that context. So this is an admission that Israel, because we're always told that Hamas is so horrible because they took women and children as hostages. But here we're told in this plan that Israel takes women and children, but somehow that's not horrible to all of these Western leaders who, are wearing their yellow ribbons for the Israeli so-called hostages, who the only ones remaining in Gaza alive are prisoners of war. And they keep calling them hostages in this plan. Then they say here in point 6, once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. So a couple of things here. Amnesty is something you give to criminals. So this is defining the resistance, those fighting against this evil, genocidal so-called army, are the prisoners who need amnesty, and not the wanted war criminals who head the Israeli government and who man its army and who are being investigated by the ICC now, even though indictments haven't been issued. But, those against whom the Hind Rajab Foundation, for one, is collecting evidence. And then members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage. So a call for exile, which is, of course, illegal. Now, then they say, upon acceptance of this agreement, full aid will be immediately sent into the Gaza Strip, at minimum matching the quantities that were sent in during the January to March truce, which Israel, of course, violated. And then it says, including the entry of necessary equipment to remove rubble and open roads. And remember, in that January truce, from January to March, Israel didn't allow in any of the heavy equipment that it had promised in that truce to open roads. We remember we spoke to Asim and Nabih of the Gaza municipality about that. And so why would we think that Israel will do now what it refused to do under the terms of a previous agreement it signed up to? Point 8 talks about entry of distribution of aid in the Gaza Strip will proceed without interference from the two parties, though the United Nations is through the United Nations and Agency of the Red Crescent, in addition to other international institutions not associated in any manner with either party. Now, that appears to be a concession to the extent that it excludes the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which we've talked about so much, this Christian Zionist-run organization that basically attracts Palestinians in order to be massacred. And opening the Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism implemented under the January 19, 2025 agreement. Correct me if I'm wrong, but was Rafah ever opened under that agreement? It was never actually opened. Am I correct? So the text here contains a lie. It says the same mechanism implemented under the January 19, 2025 agreement, which means it won't be reopened because that's what happened under the January agreement. And then they say here, back to the aid point, that it will be distributed through the United Nations and its agencies and the Red Crescent in addition to other international institutions not associated in any manner with either party. Now, that appears reasonable on the surface, but remember that Israel accuses UNRWA, for example, of being a front for Hamas. So Israel can say, well, UNRWA is basically associated with Hamas, so we're not going to allow UNRWA to distribute aid. So that's just one example of the many traps that are in this agreement if it ever came to that point. I'm just gonna, guys, come in if you want to, or I'll keep. Keep going.
It's an avalanche of
it's that part's not clear because that did look like the end of the GHF. That part did look,
but unless again, other international agencies, unless they're trying to kind of
not associated with the two parties. So I think
they keep saying that they're a private, independent organization. So
that's how I read it.
Yeah. So, but it's unclear. Yeah. And then they say this
intentionally is unclear. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where we get into some of the stuff that really grabbed a lot of headlines and rightly outraged a lot of people. They say Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for people in Gaza. This committee will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts with oversight and supervision by a new international transitional body, the Board of Peace, which will be headed and chaired by President Donald J. Trump and chaired with other members and heads of state to be announced, including former Prime Minister Tony Blair. I mean, do we need to say anything more about Tony Blair? I mean, honestly, the level of evil here is just off the charts.
As someone said on social media, I think it was yesterday or the day before, finally, an English gentleman will be put in charge of running Palestine.
Yes, exactly.
Just the colonial arrogance.
It is outright, appointing a viceroy. Yeah. And of course, the point has been made, and it's worth repeating, that Tony Blair is a war criminal. Yep. Who is largely responsible for the invasion and destruction of Iraq and Afghanistan and many other crimes. And Blair, and this is the model that the US imposed on Iraq after its 2003 invasion, where it appointed L. Paul Bremer, this US official, to act as the colonial governor of Iraq. And now the colonial governor will be the war criminal Tony Blair under this vision. And they say here then, this body will set the framework and handle the funding for the redevelopment of Gaza until such time as the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform program. Now, remember that according to the Western sponsors of the Palestinian Authority has been undergoing reforms for the last 30 years, and they're still not complete. So that's an open-ended reform program. Mm-hmm. And we'll come back to who gets to decide when that's done.
This happens on top of something that the Palestinians have already accepted. Hamas has already accepted with the other factions to create a community support council that aren't affiliated with parties, that don't have quotas from the parties, that are technocrats that will run Gaza. Hamas has accepted that as part of the ceasefire negotiations previously. So this is undermining that indigenous council.
Well, I mean, no Palestinians had any say in the writing of this document. I mean, it's even more basic than that.
Yeah.
This was written presumably by Israel and the United States, and probably Tony Blair.
Yeah.
You know, all those kinds of people.
Jared
so there's
Kushner.
nothing in here that
Qatari mediators and
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just looking for something in my notes here. But then we go to point 10, which is the Trump economic development plan. And this is sort of, shorthand for the AI generated images of a Riviera that we talked about previously, to attract investments. So this sort of brings to mind Gulf capital mediated by Jared Kushner and other absolute enemies of the Palestinian people, that will create, quote, jobs, opportunity, and hope for future Gaza. A special economic zone with preferred tariff and access rates to be negotiated with participating countries. Now, again, this takes us back to the Iraq invasion 2 decades ago, when you had these neocons in Washington who were, foaming at the mouth for this invasion. And after they invaded Iraq, wanted to use Iraq as a testing ground for all of their most extreme economic ideas, like flat taxes, abolishing all regulation, etc., etc. And so, again, this is it brings that back to mind of using Gaza as a testing ground. Now here, point 12 appears to be another crucial point, perhaps can be interpreted as an admission that Israel cannot achieve one of its key goals. It says no one will be forced to leave Gaza, and those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. We will encourage people to stay and offer them the opportunity to build a better Gaza. So that appears to be an admission, at least there, that fundamental goal of ethnically cleansing Gaza is unachievable, at least for now. Anything on that? I see you nodding, John.
Yeah, no, that was, I think that there's a few things in here that the Qatari mediators that you can see they addressed. They addressed the Trump Riviera. They addressed the ethnic cleansing. And that's what we're seeing there. Yeah.
The whole this whole free to return. I mean, with what guarantees for any of these points? But I always bristle at this. Oh yeah, they're free to return. If they want to leave Gaza while it is being rebuilt by American contractors and Saudi, billionaires. Yeah, of course they can return. Like with Palestinians have been trying to return for 80 years. What guarantees are there that this point in particular could be carried out? I mean, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the problem with having these negotiators that so that Qatar accepts this overall plan, but thinks because they tweaked a few admittedly pretty key things, there won't be ethnic cleansing.
Right.
The GHF is not going to be who delivers aid. There's a few things in here, the annexation of Gaza, but you're not a mediator if you're just, adding things in the margins of a surrender document. You're
with
not,
no timeline, no conditions, no, there's like, I don't know.
There's more to say about the so-called mediators. There's some other things I want to show. So hold on to those points because they're important. So then this is important. They say Hamas and other factions agree to not have any role in the governance of Gaza directly, indirectly, or in any form. Remember, Hamas is the party that overwhelmingly won the last election in Gaza. There's lots of people critical of Hamas. Palestinians are allowed to have their opinions about Hamas, but only Palestinians can choose who leads them. And this, again, sort of plays into this idea that Hamas are Martians. They came from the moon. And that they're sort of outside agitators or an outside element. This idea that they're a proxy of Iran. Hamas are a part of the Palestinian people. That's where they come from. So they want to exclude a significant part of Palestinian society from participating in Palestinian society.
Yeah.
And they say all military, terror, and defensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. I want to say, I'm going to stop there because the next part I want to say something specific about. But again, John, I mean, if the Israelis could do it, why didn't they do it? So there's like, Hamas, you must destroy the tunnels we couldn't destroy. And of course, calling it terror infrastructure in a document endorsed by so-called Arab.
The tunnels are Palestinian tunnels. They're not Hamas tunnels. They're Palestinian tunnels.
And they're not terror tunnels. And they're not terror tunnels. They are resistance tunnels.
Yeah, and they're for all the people of Palestine to defend their territory.
Which is their right. Now, the next sentence. Oh, sorry, John. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. The next sentence, this language, I know that many of our Irish friends who are watching will recognize this. It says, there will be a process of demilitarization of Gaza under the supervision of independent monitors, which will include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program, all verified by the independent monitors. Now, that language comes almost directly from the agreements around Northern Ireland, which Tony Blair played a key role in. So they just cut and paste that language. I recognize it because I studied those agreements carefully. But the difference here is that in the context of Ireland, you had a reciprocal process. That it wasn't a surrender by the Irish resistance to the British. There was a reciprocal process of decommissioning, of withdrawing British forces, of dismantling bases, of abolishing the Royal Ulster Constabulary, the brutal fascist death squads of the British state, and replacing them with a supposedly more democratic and accountable police service in the north of Ireland. Now, there's all sorts of criticisms of that agreement. I don't want to get into that now. That's a very interesting topic. But the point is, there was a reciprocal process. There is no reciprocal process here for decommissioning and monitoring, where Israel takes one step to decommission its weapons and the Palestinians take another, and then, we go forward like that. So it's using this idea that, Tony Blair, he played this big role in Ireland, and so he can bring his expertise here. No, and of course, it wasn't just the IRA who gave up their weapons. It was the loyalist Protestant supremacist gangs backed by the British state as well. Where is the decommissioning of settler weapons in this agreement? Where is the decommissioning of the Israeli army and its death squads? It's not there. And then all of a sudden, they start at this point. It's very curious. Up to this point, which is point 13, they had been talking about a better Gaza or just Gaza or future Gaza. Now in point 13, they start talking about new Gaza with a capital N, capital G, new Gaza, and they refer to new Gaza throughout the rest of the document. Now, this will show how old I am, but this reminded me of the terrible 1980s science fiction series, Buck Rogers in the 21st, or was it 25th century? I can't remember now, which I used to like, but
25th,
25th century, where they were, it was a post-apocalyptic world, and their capital was New Chicago. So, so New Gaza, like New Chicago.
I mean, this is like where they're just getting into wish casting, aren't they? Well, they're just saying, all military terror and offensive infrastructure will be destroyed and not rebuilt. It's just,
and New Gaza will be tolerant,
AI generated.
coexistence with its neighbors peacefully. Right,
Yeah,
of
it's
course.
like that
Totally
ridiculous,
AI generated. It's slop, as the kids say.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to skip forward to what I think are some of the more crucial points, because we could spend all day on this. But let's go to point 15, because, again, this is, you called this wish casting, Ace, I think it is. The United States will work with Arab and international partners to develop a temporary international stabilization force to immediately deploy in Gaza. The ISF will train and provide support to vetted Palestinian police forces in Gaza, and will consult with Jordan and Egypt, who have extensive experience in the field. Yes, they do. They have been training collaborationist PA forces for decades in the hope of sending them into Gaza to serve Israel as they do the West Bank.
But this is more wish casting, because who's going to do this?
Nobody.
They're saying the Palestinian Authority can't do it. They're ruling them out.
Right.
But who's it going to be? It could be the Abu Shabaab militia.
Yes. 300,
criminals released from the prisons in Gaza. It's completely unrealistic, even on its own terms.
Exactly. But the idea here is that you'll send in Arab and other international collaborators to dismantle the resistance on behalf of Israel, to do what Israel couldn't do. But basically to do what the Palestinian Authority does now, which is to try to fight the resistance on behalf of Israel and the West Bank. Point 16. This is funny because it sounds good. I mean, none of it's funny. You know what I mean. Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. Well, that sounds good, right? Sounds like a concession. But remember that Israel has claimed that it does not occupy Gaza since 2005. Remember the Israeli talking point. We withdrew from Gaza in 2005. We gave them everything. We gave them greenhouses. We gave them strawberries. And they attacked us. We left them alone and they attacked us. If only they spent all their effort to build a beautiful Gaza instead of attacking us. So as far as Israel is concerned, they don't occupy Gaza now. So this is meaningless. But here they say, and go back to the earlier point. So think about that. Here they say, as the ISF establishes control and stability, the Israel Defense Forces will withdraw based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization that will be agreed upon between the IDF, ISF, the guarantors, and the United States, with the objective of a secure Gaza that no longer poses a threat to Israel, Egypt, or its citizens. So all of this language, again, casting the victims of genocide, those who are under occupation resisting, as the threat, and not the occupier, and not the perpetrator of genocide. But everything in this says Israel decides when it should withdraw. Israel decides. So we'll look at this clip of Netanyahu next, saying, oh, well, this plan says Israel doesn't have to withdraw. And people were saying, oh, Netanyahu, actually, why don't we look at that now, Tamara, if we can, if I'm not messing you up too much with the order. I think it makes sense to look at this now.
זה היה ביקור מצוין. גם ההתחלה באום וגם הסיום בוושינגטון. זה הביקור הרביעי שלי בוושינגטון.
So this is Netanyahu bragging about.
במקום שהחמאס יבודד אותנו, הפכנו את היוצרות ובודדנו את החמאס. עכשיו כל העולם, גם העולם הערבי והמוסלמי, לוחץ על החמאס לקבל את התנאים שהצבנו יחד עם הנשיא טראמפ, לשרת כל חטופינו, החיים והחללים כאחד, כשצה"ל נשאר ברוב הרצועה.
There he says, well, the IDF remains in most of Gaza. And then he says later in this clip, he says there will be absolutely no Palestinian state. So he's denying that this requires a withdrawal. And people were saying that, aha, look, Netanyahu came out and is already reneging on the terms of this agreement. But he's actually not, because if you read this point, Tamara, if we can go back to the 20-point plan, point 16 actually places it entirely in the hands of Israel and the United States to decide if and when to withdraw and whether the Palestinians have done enough to satisfy Israel. And we all know what the answer to that will be, that 30 years after the Oslo Accords, Israel still hasn't withdrawn from the West Bank as it was supposed to. So we can see where that is going. And this is just a repeat of that. So
can we look at the last sentence of that point too?
Yeah.
Until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza, save for a security perimeter presence that will remain until Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent terror threat.
Yeah, they're keeping the buffer zone, an expanded buffer zone.
Forever.
That's forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
And then it says, point 17, in the event Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above, including the scaled-up aid operation will proceed in the terror-free areas handed over from the IDF to the ISF. So again, aid being used as a weapon, that only in the areas where there are collaborators, like the Abu Shabab gang that we spoke about over the last few months, only food will only go there. You won't be allowed to have food in areas that haven't surrendered to the genocidal occupier. Now, point 19, where to start with this? While Gaza redevelopment advances and when the PA reform program is faithfully carried out, remember the PA has been reforming for 30 years, according to the so-called international community, and is still not done.
Even though they do everything. Everything
if it was
and more
halfway,
over and above what the Israelis in the West
Tony
want.
Blair was involved in that project.
Right. That's right.
Absolutely. If the PA is halfway done, they've still got 30 more years of reform at least. So while Gaza redevelopment advances and when the PA reform program is faithfully carried out, so in the, perpetually postponed future, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. Remember, we talked about this last week, that tricky word aspiration. No Palestinian rights are in here. I mean, we recognize I don't know, we recognize that I recognize that my neighbor has the aspiration to live in a giant mansion with a swimming pool. I mean, that may be his aspiration, but it means nothing if he doesn't have the means to make it happen. So it's just meaningful language. And remember, this is going to be endorsed by all the countries that just last week were telling us they recognized recognized the state of Palestine as independent and sovereign. And now we're back to not even the conditions may finally be in place for a Palestinian state. No, they don't say that. They say the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to a Palestinian state. I mean, can we add any more adjectives and qualifiers in here? So this is a surrender document disguised as a peace plan, and it has been, let's see, we already talked about Netanyahu saying that it does not require Israel to agree to a Palestinian state, which he is absolutely correct about. It doesn't require Israel to withdraw from Gaza anytime in the foreseeable future. He's absolutely correct about that. One of the rare occasions Netanyahu is being completely truthful. And then let's take a look at what Palestinian human rights groups are saying, because nobody ever asks Palestinians what they think. They were given no say in this, but PHROC is the Palestinian Human Rights Organizations Council, and this includes groups like Al-Haq, Al-Mizan, Ad-Damir, and other groups that are well known.
And have been sanctioned by the U.S. government.
The Palestinian Center for Human Rights. And these are serious organizations that know international law well. And they've been sanctioned by the United States because they have gathered so much evidence of Israel's crimes for the ICC. And they say that the Palestinian Human Rights Organizations Council condemns the ultimatum issued by the United Nations on 29 September, which conditions the suspension of Israel's ongoing genocide on Gaza upon unilateral terms dictated by the Trump administration to be a grave violation of international law and an outright assault on the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. They say also that they welcome all genuine efforts to end the genocide in Gaza, but the U.S. plan does not aim to end Israel's settler colonial apartheid regime and unlawful occupation, but rather to entrench and normalize it by rewarding Israel's systematic crimes of apartheid, persecution, and genocide, and the plan denies Palestinians their most fundamental rights. In stark contrast to the consistent international calls for the release of Israeli hostages, there has been near silence regarding Palestinian hostages, including that Israel continues to withhold 732 bodies of Palestinians in morgues and military cemeteries, including 67 children and 85 Palestinian prisoners who died in Israeli detention, many as a result of starvation, and 10 women. So none of that is in this so-called plan.
Or the thousands of Gazans who were taken. I think the number that are going to be returned is something like 1,000.
1,700, they claim.
1,700, and there's more than that.
Yeah. And so the Palestinian human rights groups really make a very thorough critique of this, and then they call on third states to reject President Trump's 20-point plan as a manifest breach of the Palestinian people's collective and inalienable rights of self-determination. We've had reaction from Let's Go Tamara to there's a post from Dropsite News which had reaction from Mohammed al-Hindi, the deputy head of Islamic Jihad, one of the resistance factions, and he calls this draft a congratulatory note between Trump and Netanyahu, written to give the occupation on paper what it failed to win after 2 years of war.
Can I just jump in on that, Ali? Because the goals of the war for Israel, none of them have been achieved. They were to return the captives through violence. That's not happening. This proposal realizes that, because that's what they're trying to do with it. It was to destroy the Hamas government, the government in Gaza. It was to destroy the Qassam brigades, and it was to make Gaza never be a threat to Israel again. And none of those have been achieved to any real measure. And so this is just a document that's dropped on top of all four of the failures of the objectives of Israel's war. So that Hamas can't be part of any government. Those are weasel words too, because then all of a sudden now all the teachers, all the municipal workers, anyone who's paid by the government would be ineligible to build the next government, which they would be crucial pieces of. So I mean,
shouldn't the Palestinians have a say in who the Israeli government would be on the same measure? Like, I mean, the whole thing is so colonial, and trying, there's no responsibility placed. There's no punishment placed for the aggressors. Here, it's so, I can't imagine that the Palestinians will accept this proposal, whatever we want to call it.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Let's come back to that question too. Now let's look. Remember, we just had the Palestinian human rights groups calling on third states to absolutely reject this. Now let's look at how some of the third states and key members of the so-called international community are reacting to it. So starting with Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, who welcomes it. I welcome the announcement yesterday by the President of the United States intended to achieve a ceasefire and sustainable peace for Gaza and the region. So that's what he's framing it as. He's framing this this document to implement genocide and surrender and to demonize the people resisting genocide as a plan for a ceasefire and a sustainable peace. And he makes no demands for justice, for accountability, for Israel to be disarmed. So this is Antonio Guterres, who's supposed to be defending international law and human rights, using his position as head of the UN to launder this agreement. And this man is absolutely the lowest of the low. We've talked about him week after week. This man should be on trial. This man has absolutely trashed whatever credibility the United Nations has, which wasn't much to start with, and he is violating every principle which the United Nations was supposedly set up to defend. It was supposed to defend international law against criminals. It was supposed to ensure that colonized people achieved self-determination. It was supposed to protect human rights, and he is a tool of the most evil forces on the planet. And what more can I say about that? Now let's go. Does anyone else want to come in on Antonio Guterres? All right.
No, you said it all.
Let's go to this statement from the Foreign Ministry of Qatar on behalf of Qatar, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. So this is the Arab Muslim cover for this genocide plan, and the plan which the French foreign minister is honest enough to say is supposed to force the resistance to surrender. They tried to spin it and repackage it as a path towards a two-state solution, which it very clearly isn't if you read the text, which we just did together. But this is Arab Muslim cover. What these countries all yearn to do is to destroy the Palestinian resistance, to destroy the resistance in Lebanon, and to leave the region defenseless before Israel, or at least that's the only conclusion one can reach when you see them endorsing this plan to empower Israel to continue to starve, occupy, and destroy Gaza forever, even if they claim that they want to rebuild it. So I join the Palestinian human rights groups in condemning anyone who tries to spin or put a veneer of legitimacy on this plan. I think it's outrageous.
Yes. It's not just outrageous, it's insulting to everyone's intelligence.
Yeah.
It's arrogant. It's depraved. It also I've just been thinking about this a lot. The way that in all of these statements and all of these coercive measures to try and get Hamas and the Palestinians to submit forever, surrender everything. Just the this kind of like the way that Israel is just inevitable, that Israel's violence is completely acceptable, that Israel as a state, as the manifestation of this depraved, violent, genocidal ideology of Zionism is completely normal, is not, never questionable. And I don't understand, the world sees Israel for what it is. And after 2 years, we're now entering the third year of genocide. And Israel has tried and tried and tried to rehabilitate and cover up its reputation. And it is failing. It is failing everywhere.
Look at that empty UN hall we saw last week when Netanyahu was speaking to an empty hall. And these Arab and Muslim vassals of the United States ride to the rescue.
Shameful.
So that Netanyahu can say, even the Arab and Muslim states are putting pressure on Hamas. And we just had this comment from the Egyptian foreign minister that I saw come across the newswire. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has said his country is working alongside Qatar and Turkey to convince Hamas to support Trump's Gaza plan. Quote, we are meeting with them, Abdulati said during an event in France. We are coordinating with our brothers in Qatar and also our colleagues in Turkey in order to, convince Hamas to respond positively to this plan. What does that mean? They're trying to convince Palestinians to surrender to Israel, to give up their defensive weapons and their right to resist. I mean, of course, we know that that's what these regimes have always wanted because that's what they did. They surrendered. They gave up their right to defend themselves and their territory and handed over their future to Israel and Washington. And that phone call we saw of, when Netanyahu was in the White House on Monday, of him, apologizing to the Emir of Qatar for the bomb attack, for the Israeli attack on Doha 2 weeks ago. What does that mean? Remember
Trump holding the phone.
Yeah, he was holding it in his lap. And Netanyahu had the receiver with the old school, like the landline. Yeah.
Yeah, that was kiss and make up.
Yeah,
that was kiss and make up.
That's
you
right.
know, they're
call
on
your
the
brother,
same.
right?
They're on the same side. They're on the same side. I mean, Qatar should have gone to the International Court of Justice to demand a ruling and reparations for the Israeli attack, not a phone call from an indicted ICC war criminal to say, "Oh, we're so sorry."
Not even it wasn't even an apology that they struck that Israel hit Qatar. It was that they missed. That Netanyahu was sad that they missed their targets in Doha. And what's to say that the next time there's some sort of theater of a ceasefire process in Doha, that Israel won't successfully strike the next time. There's nothing, our friend Justin Podor, half joked a few weeks ago, Qatar is probably going to apologize for being bombed by Israel. And that's essentially what happened.
I mean, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, all these states, they're in with, these corrupt figures from Trump world, the investments, the Gulf investment slush funds and so on, Jared Kushner, all of that is going on behind the scenes. And so they have bigger fish to fry than, stopping a genocide. Yeah. So it really, yeah.
The Western media coverage of this, I caught this on NPR yesterday, and I wrote it down because NPR had a headline about what we've just been talking about. And their headline was, "Will Hamas accept Trump's plan? This former Mossad chief says it should."
That's fantastic. But if I may, John, that's a perfect lead into the point that at least I want to cap my comments with, is that this is being framed as a Palestinian choice.
Yeah.
And everyone is saying, oh, what will Hamas do? Will they say yes? Will they say no? Will they say yes, but? And this is a fallacy and a trap that we should not fall into, because Palestinians have no choice here. It is not the Palestinians who hold the decision for what will happen next. It is, of course, the United States and Israel. And, of course, all their accomplices. They are the ones who've driven this genocide from the beginning. And we've seen that it doesn't matter what any Palestinians say or do when it comes to Israel. Yasser Arafat and the PLO said, yes, we'll accept a Palestinian state in a fraction of historic Palestine. You want us to police the Palestinians on your behalf and kill Palestinians to protect you? Yasser Arafat said, yes, we'll do it. We'll create a Palestinian Authority to police Palestinians on your behalf. And they did it. And Yasser Arafat didn't do it enough for them. Okay, we'll bring Mahmoud Abbas, who came and said, for us, security cooperation, in other words, collaboration and treachery with Israel is sacred to us. And that is Mahmoud Abbas's religion. His true religion is collaboration with Israel. It hasn't been enough. So Israel doesn't take yes for an answer. How many ceasefires did Hamas agree to with Israel? Time after time, and Israel violated every single one of them. And in January, Hamas agreed to a ceasefire on American terms and implemented it. And even the Israeli army said between the January to March ceasefire or truce, I don't think we should call it ceasefire, that Hamas didn't violate it. The Israeli army said it at the time. We talked about that on the show. John, correct me if I'm wrong about that. And Israel violated it. The same with Lebanon. The same with every agreement. So the idea that it's in the hands of Palestinians is a way of absolving Israel of its responsibility and absolving the United States. What they want to do here is to create a pretext to say, oh, well, we made another, the same with, I don't want to go into another tangent about the so-called Camp David negotiations of the year 2000, but it was the same thing. The idea that we made this generous offer to the Palestinians and they refused it. And so we had no choice but to murder and kill them and steal their land. And this goes to that vile saying that the Israelis like to repeat. Was it Abba Eban, the South African-born Israeli foreign minister, who said, his famous phrase was, the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. So the idea that time and again, we are so reasonable, but those radicalized Palestinians are just so bloody-minded and so filled with hatred that they will never accept peace. And that's right there in point number one of the so-called Trump plan. Number one, Gaza will be de-radicalized because it's the Palestinians who are extreme and radical. And I think really the best historical analogy for this, the most accurate, is the United States treaties with the indigenous nations of what is now called North America, or the British treaties with the First Nations in what is now Canada. The treaties were always just an opportunity for the settlers to rest, recreate, and reload before moving on to their next conquest, their next massacre, the next phase of the genocide. There is no agreement that indigenous peoples in America could have made with the settlers that would have saved them. Because it's part of the American civil religion that it was manifest destiny. We were always going to take over the land from coast to coast. So what you can do by negotiating with Israel is just get yourself a temporary truce, breathing space. But you can't negotiate with Zionism, because Zionism is a genocidal, totalitarian ideology that wants to destroy you. I've said it before, and I'll say it here again, that you can coexist with Zionism just as much as you can coexist with a house fire. Either you extinguish the fire or it consumes you. And Zionism is that fire. As Haim Bresheeth-Zabner told us, it is the West's chaos agent, destroying the region and destroying the world. And in 2025, when we're almost on the doorstep of 3 years of this Holocaust, to see Arab dictatorships and the world's most populous Muslim states like Indonesia and Pakistan. Shame on you. And if we have Pakistani viewers and Indonesian viewers today, I'm sorry that your country, your governments, who claim to be your governments, are doing this, because we know how strong the solidarity of the people are. But to see Pakistan signing up to this, to see Indonesia, and of course Turkey, I mean, the most two-faced state in the region, the people of Turkey, the solidarity is incredible. But NATO member Turkey that continues to supply oil across its territory to Israel, now pushing for, this on the one hand, I mean, we have Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, time and again going into international forums and getting plaudits from people for saying Hamas are not terrorists, they're resistance fighters. And at the same time, Turkey endorsing a so-called Trump plan that defines the resistance as terrorists and demands they give up their weapons. How more two-faced can you be than that? I've been learning Turkish, I told you that. They call that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 in Turkish, which literally means two-faced. It's the Turkish word for hypocrisy. 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Bu büyük 𝐓𝐡𝐞. This is huge hypocrisy.
Preach.
I'm done.
I mean, the last thing I just want to say is, the New York Times also had an interesting editorial, I think it was yesterday, where they also called for the de-radicalization of Palestinians and framing it as this is the only way, for peace in this region is to finally, yes, the Palestinians need to be de-radicalized. They need to renounce violence. And this is how the mainstream liberal media is also framing this, along with Guterres, along with the Pope, all of these kind of these paragons of liberal Zionist institutions. Is that once again, it's the Palestinians, as you said, Ali, it's always the Palestinians that need to be de-radicalized. And only if they renounce, their resistance, their terror against their enemy, against their neighbors, will peace finally come to them. And again, completely washing over any sort of culpability of Israel and the ideology of Zionism and the criminality of this project. It's just, I don't know. Aren't we all tired of this? I'm exhausted. I know we all are, of constantly being gaslit by these institutions and by these so-called leaders.
This was a deeply disappointing document. There's no question about
Yeah.
that. Even for
Yeah.
deeply cynical people,
Yeah.
this document was.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a
You're
gut
so
punch.
diplomatic, John.
Yeah.
Deeply disappointing.
Deeply disappointing.
It's just, like our friends in Gaza, they want anything to hold on to,
Yeah.
that there's some resolution coming to their situation, and to just use people like that and erase them from this document. It's just, it's really, I mean, this is a genocidal document. This document in itself is the end of the Palestinian national movement. And so that the genocidaires get to decide, through a document to fulfill the last part of their genocide, which has failed to destroy the institutions, failed to destroy the resistance, failed to return their captives.
It's disturbing.
I mean, when you talked about Indonesia and Turkey, I can say that Canada's UN delegation remained in the otherwise completely empty theater while Netanyahu gave his speech. So, solidarity with awful governments.
There are many, too many. All right. Well, on that note, we have just a quick.
We have a good news story.
Oh, good. Good. Please. Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple. We'll just do them. We'll do them quickly. But the first one is that, US public support for Israel has plunged to an all-time low. And I know this will put a smile on everyone's face, but there's the headline from the New York Times: American support for Israel dramatically declines, Times Siena poll finds. So this is a New York Times poll, and I dug into the numbers in the tables that they provide with the poll, and I'll just give you some of the headlines. 56% of registered voters polled here disapprove of Trump's handling of what they call the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, including 40% who strongly disapprove. Only 36% of registered voters approve. There is a clear age gap throughout this. Among 18 to 29-year-olds, 73% disapprove and 53% strongly disapprove. Only 21% in that age group approve of Trump's handling of the situation. Another really important number here, 51%, so that's more than half of registered voters, disapprove of sending additional economic and military aid to Israel. So that's a sea change. I mean, I can't overstate how big a sea change that is for those of us who've been watching this over many years. And that includes 35% who strongly disapprove of sending more economic and military aid to Israel. There is a strong partisan divide. 73% of Democrats oppose sending additional economic and military aid to Israel, but 71% of Republicans approve. But just look at that Democrat number. Do you see Democratic Party leaders reflecting that in their policies, in their positions and statements? They ought to change the name to the Undemocratic Party, because that's what they are. Now, some other really incredible, I have never seen numbers like this. I'm not sure if you can see that on the screen. No need to. I dug through it for you, but it's in the New York Times if you want to study it. But I've never seen a number like this. They asked, in the dispute between Israel and the Palestinians, which side do you sympathize with more, Israel or the Palestinians? Every single poll I have seen for the last 30 years that I've been watching this, a far larger number sympathize with Israel and only a minority sympathize with Palestinians. Well, now in this New York Times poll, 34% sympathize more with Israel and 35% sympathize more with Palestinians. So that's, you could say, statistically equal, but with Palestinians slightly ahead. I have never seen that before. And then you have about 20% saying both sides. They're not willing to take a position, or, so that's a sea change. Yeah. And then some other incredible numbers. They ask people whether they agree or disagree with these statements. So one statement is Israel should stop its military campaign in order to protect against civilian casualties, even if not all Israeli hostages have been released. 58% of registered voters agreed with that statement, a very clear majority. And then they asked, Israel should continue its military campaign until all hostages are released, even if it means civilian casualties in Gaza might continue. 30% agree with that. So by 60 to 30, Americans want to see an end to this genocide. Of course, the New York Times doesn't use the word genocide, but still, Americans want an end to this. Yeah. Then they ask, this was incredible, is Israel taking enough precautions to avoid civilian casualties? Only 25% agreed with that. And then, is Israel not taking enough precautions to avoid civilian casualties? 62% agreed with that. So 62% of registered voters agreed that Israel is not doing enough to prevent civilian casualties. So the Israeli propaganda that claims we're the most, no army does more than we do to protect civilians, nobody's buying it. 62% of Americans reject that. And then of that 62%, 40% say Israel is deliberately, intentionally targeting civilians, and just 16% say it is unintentional. So the American public understands that Israel is a brutal, sadistic, murderous state that is deliberately targeting civilians. That is an absolute sea change. And I don't think the stitch up of getting pro-Israel Oracle billionaire Larry Ellison, who is also a big funder of Tony Blair, getting him to buy TikTok is going to turn this around anytime soon.
Thank you for leaving us on that high note, Ali. Let's take a look at
just one more thing, Nora, just a
yeah.
very quick update.
Yeah.
I don't want people to miss this, but earlier this week, a U.S. federal judge ruled that the Trump administration unlawfully targeted pro-Palestine student activists with deportation to silence criticism of Israel violating their right to free speech. I'm reading from this Al Jazeera report by Ali Harb. And he says, in a blistering opinion on Tuesday, federal district judge William Young, an appointee of former President Ronald Reagan, said Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of Homeland Security Kirsty Noem misused their powers in the deportation campaign. Quote, they did so in order to strike fear into similarly situated non-citizen pro-Palestinian individuals, proactively and effectively curbing lawful pro-Palestinian speech and intentionally denying such individuals the freedom of speech that is their right. The judge, William Young, wrote.
That's huge.
It is huge. It's really huge.
Yeah. Yeah, because the U.S. has been wanting to deport Mahmoud Khalil, for example, after imprisoning him in an ICE detention camp for 3 months. But yeah, and so we have to keep it up. I mean, right now, college campuses, administrations here in my hometown of Berkeley, California, the chancellor of UC Berkeley just handed over the names of I think more than 150 students who have been involved in Palestine rights organizing on campus. He just handed them over to the Trump administration. Now we see, I think Cornell University has just fired a professor for pointing out that an Israeli spy who has history with the Unit 8200 intelligence services was secretly recording a class of his. And when this professor, who happens to be Jewish, but that shouldn't matter, pointed it out to the administration, I believe his classes were canceled just to protect this Israeli spy. I mean, this is the capitulation and the cowardice in these levels, in these institutions of higher education, especially.
The citadels of academic freedom and free speech.
Just they can't help but fall over themselves, capitulating over and over again to the demands of not just the federal government to suppress student speech and organizing and critical thought and academic freedom, but also to their donors and the Israel lobby groups that are pressuring them. These people are cowards, but I think more than ever, students and faculty of conscience are continuing to stick up for their rights, and so let's keep an eye on that, of course. But that is really good news about the judge ruling for once. Let's take a quick look at the website. And right there at the very top, I did an incredible interview with Manad al-Herzala, a longtime friend of the Electronic Intifada and of organizations here in the Bay Area and around. And Nadia Tanous, who has also been a longtime friend of the Electronic Intifada with the Palestinian youth movement, talking about a new campaign that's popped off demanding that the Oakland International Airport stop FedEx from shipping weapons parts and cargo to the Nevatim Air Base in occupied historic Palestine. So give that a listen or a watch. We also have some incredible features, obviously, of course, from our writers in Gaza, documenting the genocide that they are experiencing themselves firsthand, and some
The piece
reports
by Fida al-Qidra,
it's beautiful.
It's a tough piece, but
Stunning.
it underscores, a few weeks ago, international media were talking about the forced starvation, and then they moved on from that, but the starvation hasn't moved on. People are still dying from starvation in Gaza. Food is not coming in any significant quantities, and so it's so important that we still highlight this reality and inform people. So I really want people to read this and share it. It's very important that this not get just swallowed by the news cycle.
Right. Yeah, please check out Fida's piece. Ali Skeik's piece that I read in the news is phenomenal. There's so much that we have on the site right now. Ali, do you want to thank some of our listeners and viewers and readers while we're here?
I do. I just also there's so many things on, just to direct people. There is so much on so many good articles on the website that are resources that I hope people will read and share, including our colleague David Cronin did has uncovered information that despite claiming that it's no longer selling weapons to Israel, that Germany remains very, very closely involved in the arms trade with Israel. I think that's an important story, which again, with your Oakland interview, shows this international network of complicity. Israel cannot do this genocide without this global network. Maybe you call it a spider's web, an international spider's web of support for genocide, if John will allow me to use that analogy in that context. But yeah, and I just also wanted to point out, I can't remember if we had published it last week, but Zina Tahan's report on the West Bank, again, to highlight that, because with what's happening in Gaza, it's hard to give the West Bank all the attention it deserves, and we have to keep an eye on that. So I just wanted to point that out too. And yes, there's lots of people I want to thank. All the work that we do, this live stream, all the analysis you see, the many, many hours we all spend preparing, putting things together, the videos that go out on social media later, that get this message to literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people each week who watch this program. We cut it up into segments. We share it on all the platforms. It's not just those who make this community watching live. Tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of other people will see this program in the next few days and weeks, as they do every week. Tens of thousands of people read the stories on the website. We're educating people all over the world because of the support of people like you. You make it possible. We don't have governments or big foundations, or we're not NPR, we're not Fox News. We fund this work through the support of people like you who make it possible. So if you can afford it, and you want to support this work, you go to the website and hit donate now. If you are already supporting it, as many of you are, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for supporting us, for supporting our writers in Gaza, for making this journalism possible. And I just want to thank a few people, and this is just really just to symbolize all of you who support us: Susan, Stefan, Jumana, Eva, Sahar, Paulina, Patrick, Paul, Tamiko, Bruce, Kevin, Emily, Shahriyar, Caroline, Yusuf, Firas, Anne, and Faisal. Thank you to each of you, and thank you to everyone for being part of this community and helping us to educate and inspire and hopefully mobilize people all over the world to speak up and act for justice and liberation in Palestine.
Well said, as always, Ali. And of course, go to electronicintifada.net, hit the donate now link, like and subscribe this live stream, and sign up for our email list at Get Updates, right up there at the top left-hand corner. I always mix up my right and my left. Top left-hand corner to get updates. And thank you to everyone. Thank you, of course, to Tamara Nassar for directing and producing this live stream and for everything else she does. Eli Gerzon for social media, Pierre Loisel for cutting this into a radio package every week. To everyone at the Electronic Intifada, all of our colleagues and friends and contributors, on behalf of myself and John, Ali, Asa, and Tamara, thank you all, and we'll see you next week.